Confession: I, 20F, am haunted by the things I did as a teenager, and I've never managed to shake the feeling that I'm still being punished for it. It was during my sophomore year of high school that everything spiraled out of control. I was struggling to find my place, caught between the cliques and social hierarchies that reorganize themselves every week like shifting sands. My best friend, Lily, was the one constant in my life, with her wild laughter and fierce loyalty. We bonded over our shared love for dark fantasy novels and late-night horror movie marathons, imagining worlds in which we could escape the cruel realities of high school. But as the pressures of social acceptance mounted, I found myself drawn to another crowd, the popular kids, whose easy confidence illustrated a kind of life I wanted to taste. They were magnetic, and I foolishly thought that if I could just fit in with them, all my insecurities would disappear. The turning point came one afternoon in a crowded cafeteria, right after Lily had confided in me about her struggle with depression. Instead of comforting her, I chose a different path. To gain favor with the popular girls, I can't quite recall their names now, only the memories of laughter mixed with biting judgment, I told them some private things about Lily, spun them into gossip that spread faster than I ever anticipated. In my mind, I justified my betrayal as a means of survival, a twisted version of friendship where I could climb the social ladder. For a fleeting moment, it worked. I was included in their conversations, invited to their parties, and even got a taste of that coveted high school popularity. But as the days turned into weeks, the guilt began to gnaw at the edges of my newfound confidence. Watching Lily withdraw into herself, I felt the weight of my betrayal like chains wrapping around my heart, pulling me deeper into despair. There were days when I thought about approaching her, trying to explain that I never intended to hurt her, but each time I opened my mouth to speak, the words died before they could escape. Instead, she slowly drifted away, finding solace with new friends who had no connection to me, the girl who had torn her down. The remorse that consumed me was relentless. Nights were spent tossing and turning, reliving that day in the cafeteria, watching her face crumple at the realization of my treachery. Now, in the present, I've grown into a person still marred by that impulsive decision. I get countless reminders of how I lost a friend who had been my anchor, someone who had trusted me with her deepest fears, and who I had betrayed in her most vulnerable moment. Each time I hear laughter echoing down the halls or see pictures of happy faces posting perfect memories, I feel her absence as sharply as the day she walked away. A few months ago, I attempted to reach out, crafting a simple apology via text, but all I received was silence. Maybe her new friends had filled that void I left, and maybe I deserved the void too. Yet, with each unanswered message, the past clings more tightly, like a dark cloud looming over my future. In a moment of desperation, I decided to visit our old haunts, our favorite cafe, the park bench where we spent countless afternoons discussing our dreams and fears, but it felt foreign without her laughter ringing in the air. Strangely enough, as I sat there staring at the now familiar view, I felt a sense of clarity. It dawned on me that while I could not change the past, the weight of that guilt could either crush me or serve as a reminder to be better. Life is messy, and though I lost someone irreplaceable, I could still choose to learn from my mistakes, to grow in ways that would honor her memory. So, I made a silent vow, to treat others with the kindness I had once betrayed, to be the confidant I had failed to be, and, in doing so, maybe one day I would find the courage to reach out to Lily once more, not as someone who had hurt her, but as someone who had learned to be a better friend. For those interested in how my journey unfolds, I'll keep updating. Who knows? Maybe one day I'll find a way to mend what was irrevocably broken, or at least, I hope to find solace in the company of new friends along the way. As the days turned into weeks, my silent vow became both my anchor and my weight. I often found myself wandering through the halls of my university, heart pounding at the possibility of coming across someone who might remind me of those ghostly echoes of my past, particularly Lily. The campus was a blend of laughter, vibrant conversations, and the promise of new beginnings, yet it felt like a tapestry woven from the threads of secrets and unspoken regrets for me. I would catch glimpses of groups of friends sharing moments that I had once deemed unimportant, quick jokes, supportive nudges, and those shared looks that seemed to resonate with a deeper understanding. My thoughts would drift back to that fateful day when my world split at the seams, when I chose to stand idly by as Lily bore the brunt of our peers' laughter, as they tore into her, like wolves feasting on carrion. I could still see the way those tears shimmered in her eyes, deep pools of sadness and betrayal, the moment she turned away from the crowd, seeking escape where there was none. It was a sight forever etched in my mind, a cruel reminder of my own cowardice. With every new interaction, I sought small ways to connect with others, To infuse kindness into simple gestures, whether that meant smiling at a stranger or offering a helping hand when I saw someone struggling. Each moment was a reminder that vulnerability is not a weakness but a bridge to stronger relationships. It was in one of these small interactions during a group project that I met Jenna, a girl with a contagious laugh and an uncanny ability to find joy even in the most mundane discussions. She had shared a story about her childhood dog, a scrappy little mutt who had managed to steal her heart. Listening to her animated recounting was a balm to my soul. I could feel something warming inside me that had long been dormant. As weeks wove new comfort between us, our friendship blossomed, slowly stitching up my jagged edges, but I still found myself haunted by my past. On evenings when the sun dipped below the horizon, and the sky was awash with oranges and purples, I would often retreat to a quiet bench by the campus lake. I cherished those still moments, the way the water reflected the fading light, tranquil yet tumultuous, exactly how I felt of late. But it was during one of those evenings that a thought struck me like lightning. Perhaps I could reach out to Lily, not to recreate what we had, but to apologize without expectation, to show her that I had changed, that I was committed to growth. There it was, this flicker of hope. It felt almost reckless, but wasn't it just as reckless to hold on to fear? After a restless night, I typed out a message to her, hands trembling, heart racing, as I poured out everything I kept bottled up inside. The guilt, the pain, and the change within me. I hit send and immediately felt the weight of it dissipate into the air, my breath catching in my throat like a child learning to swim. Days slipped by, a mix of anxiety and anticipation weaving through me. Whenever my phone buzzed, I would jump, hoping it would be her name lighting up the screen. On more than one occasion, I braced myself to read the words that might either set me free or pull me back into the depths of regret. Instead, I found myself lost in a world of new friendships, a life burgeoning with possibilities. Jenna became my confidant, my cheerleader, as I shared the green shoots of hope sprouting from my decisions. Then, one serene afternoon, while lounging on the grass beneath the sprawling oak tree on campus, the familiar sound of that old notification echoed in my ears. I reached for my phone with trembling fingers, heart throbbing like a drum, only to find a message from an unexpected source, Lily. The straightforward sentence stared back at me, stark and unadorned. I've been thinking about what happened. It was the beginning of a long exchange, where we found ourselves discussing not just what had once transpired, but where we stood now, worlds apart yet yearning for connection. As we shared our journeys, I felt the jagged edges inside slowly smooth out. Lily had found her way through the labyrinth of pain, and in her newfound strength, she offered me a chance at redemption, not just for my sake, but for both of us. And that's when I realized that healing is not just an individual journey, it weaves itself through others' lives too, creating a vast tapestry of resilience and hope. As we forged a new beginning, I learned that true friendship often thrives not in the absence of mistakes but in our ability to acknowledge them, grow from them, and extend our hands toward one another, however shattered the past may be. I can only hope that this is just the start of a long journey of mending hearts, for both of us, complicated, messy, and beautifully raw, much like the most riveting stories worth telling. And as I find solace in this new chapter, I am reminded that even the deepest scars can blend into stronger foundations, and perhaps, in time, I'll be able to embrace the beautiful complexity of connection once again. I'll keep updating this little journey, weaving new stories alongside those that shaped me, and perhaps one day, it will all come full circle, offering a glimpse into a friendship reborn from the ashes of betrayal and regret. As the weeks turned into months, I found myself drifting into a routine that felt solid yet flexible, like the gentle currents of a river shaping the land around it. I immersed myself in volunteering at a local community center, a place bustling with laughter and warmth, where kindness was both given and received. This became my sanctuary, where stories were shared among strangers sprouting into friendships over the shared experiences of helping others. I would sit with the children, listening to their imaginative tales, allowing their innocence to remind me of the person I once was before my teenage years turned tumultuous. I carved out a space where I could connect without the weight of my past suffocating me, learning to celebrate both small victories and large defeats, forging a new identity step by step. And yet, Lily's shadow was never too far away. While I thrived on the newfound ability to empathize and support, I often thought of the moments we had shared, late-night whispers, secrets exchanged, the laughter echoing through the halls of our high school. I recalled the way our friendship felt so resilient then, until it crumbled under the weight of my choices. Each thought of her sparked a war within. Guilt and regret battled with the hope that maybe, one day, I'd find the strength to reach out. But I was haunted, too, haunted by shadows of the girl I had once betrayed, wondering if our connection could ever survive the wounds I'd inflicted. It felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, teetering back and forth, battling the wave of fear that swelled with each passing day. One afternoon, while preparing art supplies for a mural project at the center, I overheard a couple of volunteers discussing a local high school reunion that was coming up. They talked about it in excited tones, reminiscing about old crushes and the infamous cafeteria food. An unexpected thrill coursed through me at the mention of school. The memories rushed back involuntarily: Lily's laughter, her teasing banter, the way she made even the dullest days shine. That familiar tug on my heart ignited a fire of longing I thought had dulled with time. Perhaps this reunion could be my opportunity to confront my past. The thought both terrified and exhilarated me. It was a chance, an opening to reconcile, to show her that I had changed, that I was not the person who had hurt her. As I debated this within my mind, I resolved to attend, my heart pounding with the weight of what lay ahead. When the evening of the reunion finally arrived, I stood before the mirror, nervously adjusting my hair as if that would mask the turmoil bubbling under the surface. I chose a simple yet elegant dress, not wanting to draw too much attention, but inside I felt like a storm was brewing. I arrived early, clutching my phone with trembling hands, hoping that maybe I wouldn't run into her, perhaps I could just blend into the background. Yet, that was not my destiny. The room filled with familiar faces, laughter, and the comforting scent of nostalgia wafting through. It wasn't long before I spotted her across the room. Lily hadn't changed at all, her essence remained intact, as vibrant as the joking spirit I remembered. My heart raced, part of me wanting to flee, but another part anchoring me in place. I took a deep breath and steadied myself, concluding that there would be no healing without facing the wounds head on. As she caught my eye, it felt like time slowed, and memories flooded back, intoxicating me with the weight of our shared history. The room faded into a dull hum as I approached her, my heart a cacophony of beats echoing uncertainty. When she turned, our eyes locked, and in that moment, I couldn't decipher her expression: surprise, maybe even anger, but hidden within was a flicker of curiosity. I swallowed hard, words forming and collapsing in my throat like waves crashing against a rocky shore. "Hey, Lily," I started, my voice trembling ever so slightly. "It's been a long time." The silence stretched like a taut rope between us, filled with so many unspoken sentiments. Her smile faltered and faded, replaced by a cautious expression. "Yeah, it really has." The weight of what I had done lay between us like an uninvited guest, dimming the brightness of the occasion. I took a step closer, fueled by every ounce of regret I had harbored. "I'm really sorry for what happened. I've spent a lot of time thinking about our friendship and how I hurt you. I can't change the past, but I'm hoping maybe we can talk?" There was a long pause, and in that moment, I felt a mix of hope and despair wash over me. My heart hammered against my ribcage as I watched the emotions play across her face: confusion, pain, and perhaps flickers of understanding. "I don't know if talking will help," she replied softly, her voice a fragile thread woven with the weight of our shared history. "I understand," I said, clasping my hands in front of me, an unconscious gesture of vulnerability. "But I need you to know that I've changed. I know that my choices hurt you in ways I can't fix, but I want to do better. I want to learn to be the friend you deserved." With that, I felt a small shift, like the first glimmers of dawn breaking through a long, dark night. Slowly, her expression softened, revealing a hint of the warm-hearted girl I'd once shared secrets with. "Maybe we can try," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, igniting a spark of hope within me. For the rest of the evening, we spoke about our lives, our journeys, the lessons we had learned, and the shadows we still faced. What once felt like an insurmountable mountain to climb now unfolded as a path strewn with possibilities. As the night wore on, I realized that though we would never erase the past, we could take steps forward together, perhaps allowing our friendship to evolve and heal. By the time I left, it wasn't just a reunion I attended, it was a catharsis, a tangible step toward reconciliation. As I lay in bed that night, my heart felt lighter than it had in years. I knew this journey wouldn't be easy. The scars of betrayal were etched deeply in both of us, and while time might not heal everything, I hoped it would, at the very least, allow us to stitch the pieces back together, each encounter strengthening the fragile threads of our renewed bond. I nestled under my covers, letting the warmth wash over me, and closed my eyes, dreaming of a friendship reborn, rekindled amidst the rich tapestry of our shared stories. As I drifted off, I remembered my silent vow, to treat others with kindness, to acknowledge my past mistakes, and to never lose sight of the power of connection, even when it felt far out of reach. Confession: I gave head to a freaking banana. Yes, you read that right, and before you jump to conclusions about my sanity, let me explain. I'm just an average 20-something living in a small town, working at a local grocery store, and spiraling into a mild existential crisis as I try to figure out life and relationships. I've always had a quirky sense of humor, but my friends would often joke that my romantic life was just as ripe for comedy as it was for disaster. My last relationship had ended in a particularly awkward way. He had decided he needed space, only to backtrack and unceremoniously announce he was now dating someone who he claimed was better suited for him. I didn't have the heart to tell him that meant the end of my nights spent watching terrible reality TV and my weekends filled with the silence of loneliness. So, in my state of mild despair, I decided to throw a little party for myself. I bought a few bottles of wine, some snacks, and yes, a bunch of bananas. I sat on the couch, watching my favorite movies while indulging in a few glasses. As the evening wore on, the combination of a couple of glasses of wine and my ever-present bad sense of humor led to an unusual thought. Wouldn't it be funny to recreate a famous scene from a movie using just a banana? There I was, giggling to myself, holding the banana in one hand, and promptly made a comment about giving head to the banana, laughing hysterically at my own lack of dignity. My mind was buzzing with the absurdity of it all, but as I leaned in to take a ridiculously dramatic bite, inspiration struck. What if I turned it into a performance? It felt ridiculous but sort of liberating. Why not poke fun at my love life and the angst that seemed to follow me like a bad smell? I set my phone on a nearby shelf, hit record, and proceeded to give the banana a show. I don't know what possessed me, perhaps it was the wine or the need to embrace the absurdity of life, but I made a point to give that banana a moment to shine. I twirled and laughed, exaggerating every move until I lost myself in the charade, winking at the camera and pretending the banana was the sweetest lover I'd ever had. So there I was, full of self-derision and ridiculousness, recording myself in what I now refer to as the banana incident. A few friends got a hold of the video, and to my astonishment, it turned into a mini-viral sensation among a tight-knit group of social media friends. What had started as a moment of deep sadness turned into something quite remarkable. It pulled me back from the brink of feeling sorry for myself and showed me that laughter, even at my own expense, was a gift I'd forgotten I possessed. Weeks went by, and I began to embrace my sense of humor in ways I never thought possible, sharing my journey through life and heartbreak in an unapologetic light. I connected with new people online, all drawn to my newfound candor and kooky content. Perhaps life didn't need to be so serious. Just when I thought I was done with the banana saga, I got an unexpected message. It was from an old college friend, someone I hadn't spoken to in years. His messages were lighthearted and full of laughter, recalling the outrageous things we did back in our carefree days. It led to a few exchanges back and forth, and the connection felt different, deeper somehow. We agreed to meet up, and to my surprise, I found myself excited, because he had seen the infamous banana video and thought it was the most hilarious thing he'd ever witnessed. When we met, it was awkward but charming in a way that felt warm. We talked, we laughed, and as the evening wore on, I realized that this was the first time I truly felt connected to someone since that terrible breakup. So, you see, giving head to a banana wasn't just a ridiculous act of drunken escapism, it was a turning point that led me to rediscover laughter, rekindle friendships, and embrace the beauty of the absurd in life. Sometimes, you have to let go of everything, even your dignity, to find joy and connection. In retrospect, my confession isn't about the banana, it's about how taking a moment to explore the ridiculousness we often shy away from can lead us down enchanting, unexpected paths. Update: a month later, that college friend and I decided to take things to the next level. We're officially dating. And yes, we've shared a few more crazy moments that involve fruits and laughter, which have solidified our bond even more. Life can be so wonderfully absurd, and honestly, I can't wait to see where this new adventure takes us, knowing that sometimes the most ridiculous confessions can lead to the greatest joys. As I sit down to reflect on the whirlwind of my life since that fateful day, a gentle smile creeps across my face, and I can't help but laugh at how surreal it all feels. The very idea that I, a fairly normal 20-something struggling to find myself in the vibrant chaos of college campus life, could end up dating one of the most adventurous spirits I know is, frankly, absurd. My experiences had primed me for a strict adherence to what was sensible, but somehow, when laughter collided with randomness, it unlocked parts of me I hadn't even realized were closed off. Let's not forget the banana, though. In mere moments of silliness, it became an emblem of spontaneity and fun, something to be looked back on fondly rather than with embarrassment. Our mutual unorthodoxy sparked an unspoken camaraderie between us, something blossoming into laughter-filled nights where we'd recount our craziest experiences over shared ice cream sundaes, rich chocolate drizzling down the sides, rivaled only by the heaps of fruity toppings we continually consumed in jest of that first encounter. Conversations flowed easily, we shared secrets intertwined with memories, and each time he'd wink at me over the table, I felt a warmth I'd once thought reserved for fairy tales. It was during one of those late-night talks, surrounded by cushions and lingering energy from a vibrant party we'd just left, that I discovered we were both fascinated by the absurd elements of life, the little quirks we found that reminded us not to take things too seriously. He confessed that day how he recently wrestled with the idea of joining a juggling club, not because he particularly wanted to juggle, but rather because it seemed hilariously awkward and a little outlandish. We burrowed deeper into our joyfully whimsical thoughts, and who knew a casual conversation could emit so much warmth and connection. As the month neatly slipped away into a golden series of dates, I found myself growing more and more attached, not just to him but to the laughter and adventure we created together, filling up my once monotonous life with dazzling episodes of spontaneity. One particular afternoon, in an impulsive fit of creativity, I suggested we should enter a local fruit sculpture competition that promoted sustainability and art. The idea met with guffaws, and he played along. We both knew it would involve making something wild and bizarre, definitely fruit-inspired. Days later, we stood in my tiny kitchen, hands sticky with juice and laughter erupting between all the gut-busting negotiations of who would carve the watermelon into a shark and who would get the pineapple crown. We envisioned an outrageous creation that would not only make the judges scratch their heads in disbelief but also bring smiles to the faces of anyone observing our ridiculous efforts. As we cut, sculpted, and assembled our fruity tribute, I realized we weren't just creating a quirky piece, we were crafting our own little sanctuary, one laugh and mishap at a time, stamped with the ridiculousness of our adventures. The day of the competition arrived in a flurry of excitement, where we displayed our overly ambitious pineapple shark hybrid that looked more like a creature out of a cartoon than anything serious. We embraced the absurdity wholeheartedly, encouraging the giggles and whispers from passers-by instead of sympathizing with our failed artistic endeavor. The joy we felt, sharing inside jokes about our outlandish expectations, made the whole experience so rich it didn't matter that we didn't win. The connection we forged amidst the chaos and creativity became its own victory lap, one I relished deeply. Looking back on this past month, I realize what really matters isn't the moments that conform to a certain ideal but rather those that push boundaries, bend the rules, and open up new ways to see our lives unfold. Whether it's giving a silly oral salute to a banana or creating the world's most ludicrous fruit sculpture, these occurrences remind us that joy blooms in the strangest of places. This relationship, which started with a whimsical confession, has encouraged me to fully embrace the absurdities and find companionship in shared laughter, transforming my once rigid view of life into a more colorful canvas ripe with joy and adventure. And as I embarked on this journey, I realized my heart isn't just bound to the fun we've shared but also to the genuine connection forming seamlessly as we continue to explore the ridiculousness that life hands us. With each step, I can't wait to discover what new crazy moment awaits us next and how these unplanned adventures will author the next chapters of our delightfully absurd story. As the weeks rolled into a month of uncharted romance, the absurdities we chased together began to shape my world in ways I had never anticipated. Our lives became a confusing yet wonderfully vibrant tapestry woven with silly moments and heartfelt confessions. We set a peculiar rhythm to our relationship, one that was fueled by spontaneity and an appreciation for the ridiculous. Our first official date was at a quaint little fruit market that sprawled just outside the city, a hidden gem we stumbled upon while searching for fresh ingredients for an impromptu picnic. As we ambled through aisles brimming with colorful produce, I found solace in our shared jokes and the way we could burst into laughter over the oddly shaped vegetables that protruded from their boxes like playful imposters. I watched her pick up a rogue-looking radish and, with a mischievous grin, announce that it resembled a mythical creature, its earthy tones giving way to vivid storytelling. It felt surreal to be with someone who embraced these fleeting absurdities as if they were sacred, as if the bizarre moments held secrets that could weave our hearts closer together. One sunny afternoon, as we tucked ourselves into a grassy nook beneath sprawling cherry blossoms, we decided to bring our own twist to the typical picnic fare. Inspired by the playful essence of our relationship, we rummaged through our gathering of fruits, bananas, kiwi, and stubbornly ripe peaches, and came up with a silly competition. Each of us would create the most absurd fruit art we could imagine, an homage to our own quirks. I crafted a banana in the shape of a guitar, complete with toothpick strings, while she managed to create a hastily constructed fruit face that made us both chuckle uncontrollably. These moments became not just laughter shared but also silent acknowledgments of the warmth blossoming between us. While we savored the summer sun, I felt my heart flutter as we gazed at one another, the playful energy uniting us in a way that felt pure and right. But life, in its beautifully chaotic nature, also had its shadows. With the excitement, I wrestled with a gnawing fear. Was this delightful absurdity merely a phase? I had seen relationships begin with laughter only to sour when mundane realities encroached. To confront these insecurities, one night I invited her over for a cozy movie marathon. As we nestled beneath blankets, our favorite snacks laid out before us, I decided to confess that I felt a flicker of worry, that our spontaneous moments could lose their charm. Instead of recoiling from my honesty, she turned to me and smiled, her eyes gleaming with understanding. Life will have its share of mundane moments, she said, her voice soothing like a gentle breeze. But as long as we keep finding joy in the ridiculous, we'll be all right. In that moment, her reassurance calmed the storm within me. This relationship, with its quirks and spontaneous laughter, inked itself deeper into my heart, no longer merely a whimsical adventure but a genuine companionship I yearned to nurture. As the season changed, so did the fabric of our relationship. We began to integrate our silliness into everyday life. Once mundane errands became bursts of comedy as we playfully reenacted scenes from our favorite films in the aisles of the grocery store or turned waiting in lines into silly competitions of who could make the best fruit-themed puns. With each shared absurdity, the bond we formed became a buoy against the currents of normalcy. Then one evening, beneath a sky spattered with stars, we found ourselves at that same cherry blossom tree, the spot where so many of our inside jokes had been born. I looked into her eyes, their warmth reflecting the moonlight in a dance. It was the perfect moment, and both a little silly and profound. Suddenly, I pulled out a small package I had hidden in my bag. I know this sounds ridiculous, I began, feeling a warrior's heart flutter in my chest, but I wanted to ask you. She eagerly leaned closer, the anticipation etched across her face. As I unveiled a small, surreal bouquet of fruit-shaped magnets, I stammered through the laughter, "If you'd be my partner in this absurd adventure for life." Her laughter filled the air as she nodded, tears of joy sparkling in her eyes. "Yes. Absolutely," she exclaimed, and in that moment, we recognized that our hearts were no longer tucked away in fearful silence but were joyfully charting an exhilarating course toward the unexpected. In the days that followed, we embraced the delightful whimsy our relationship had forged. I realized that opening myself to the ridiculous had transformed my life, urging me to cherish not only the laughter but the deep, meaningful moments shared with someone who understood the beauty of life's absurdity. As we nestled into our future together, I knew this confession wasn't just about fruit or moments of laughter, it was a celebration of the incredible joy found in embracing life as it came, each day a fresh adventure painted with the hues of love, laughter, and the delightful unknown. There was a time when every evening was filled with laughter and warmth. I would return from work to the delightful scent of a home-cooked meal, the soft glow of candlelight, and my partner Riley, who greeted me with a hug that seemed to melt my stress away. For the first few years of our marriage, we relished our shared passion for cooking, often experimenting with new recipes or recreating beloved dishes from our childhoods. I was content, and my jeans fit just right, but as life often does, it tilted on its axis. It wasn't an overnight shift, more like a slowly creeping shadow, but over the span of a year, I found myself caught in a web of unexpected challenges. It began with Riley's demanding promotion at work, which came with longer hours and increased stress. I admired their resolve but found myself lonely in the evenings, eating alone more often than not. I'd started to raid the pantry, the fun of cooking fading as every meal alone felt progressively more like a chore. I justified my choices, telling myself it was just a phase, a temporary solace in the constant churn of responsibility. But then came the unwanted comfort of takeout, when all I wanted was to escape the silence of an empty house. A greasy box of fried rice or a cheesy pizza became the remedy, the only companion in my solitude. Strangely, I believe the more I indulged, the more I'd drown out the loneliness. The evenings that once blossomed into intimate dinners turned into binge-watching sessions filled with sugary snacks, deep into the night. I realized I was gaining weight not just from the food itself but from the emotional layers I layered in each slice of pizza or scoop of ice cream, a way of filling the void in my heart. Watching the numbers climb on the scale was sobering yet surreal, like looking at a stranger in the mirror. And yet, when I tried to confide in Riley, worried that my habits were outside the bounds of what we once shared, the truth felt more fragile than ever. They'd flash a quick smile, a fleeting appreciation for my vulnerability, but I could sense an undercurrent of discomfort in their eyes, as if the weight of my struggle only added to theirs. Our conversations turned less frequent, skirting around the budding tension we were both too scared to address. I was caught in a tug-of-war between wanting to reclaim my health and fearing the laughter would fade into something unrecognizable if I laid bare my reality. The sinking feeling in my stomach grew until one evening Riley returned home, their face crumpled with exhaustion from a long day. I had prepared a lavish dinner in a last-ditch effort to recover our connection, but instead of delight, I saw concern flaring in their hazel eyes. They asked gently but deeply, "Are you okay?" I crumbled before them, admitting how I felt engulfed by the weight of my habits, my loneliness, how I felt like I was disappearing into an identity I never intended to embody. The air shifted as if we both let go of our unspoken fears. There were tears and hard truths, but ultimately, we committed to each other to navigate this twisted path together, seeking joy in preparation and balance. In time, we resurrected our kitchen adventures, discovering new recipes that both invigorated our bodies and revived the lightness in our hearts. Neither of us is exactly where we want to be, but we've learned to be patient with ourselves and each other, holding our stories together without judgment, whispering those bittersweet confessions in the quiet of our home, wrapped in warmth and rediscovered laughter. I want to believe that the weight of this journey, both the loss and the gain, will continue to weave lessons that draw us closer. If you've ever wondered how to love during the struggle, look beyond the numbers, my friend, and perhaps you will find the heart of the matter. Update: a few months have passed since that vulnerable night. Our journey took a turn towards wellness, not only physically, but emotionally as well. The weight on the scale has lessened, but what matters more is the weight of connection we've chosen to carry as a team. Riley and I have started to volunteer at a local food bank together every Saturday morning, finding joy in nourishing others while nurturing our relationship. I've learned that each step away from solitude into partnership creates a new recipe for resilience. There's magic in the connection, often unequaled by anything on a plate. If anything, those greasy takeout meals have evolved into afternoons sharing a picnic in the local park, filled with vibrant salads and hearty laughter that echoed into the sky. On those warm Saturday mornings, as the sun spilled golden light over the bustling activity of the food bank, I would often pause amidst the steady rhythm of packing and distributing meals to truly appreciate the moment. Riley and I would work side by side, our hands moving deftly through the boxes of food, exchanging soft smiles and laughter that seemed to wrap around us like a comforting blanket. It was during these hours of service that I discovered a newfound joy. It wasn't just a weekly chore, but a transformative experience that gradually unraveled the tightly wound complexities of the past. Every grain of rice we separated, every can of beans we packed, felt like a step away from the weight I once carried alone. I could see the glint of determination in Riley's eyes, and it ignited a spark within me. This wasn't just about shedding the physical weight I had accumulated but rather about lightening the emotional burden that had followed me for so long. In those reflective moments, I recalled those late nights, trapped in the cycle of mindless eating and isolation, where food served as a reluctant companion during my bouts of loneliness. I had never truly grasped how my relationship with food mirrored my relationship with people. Unable and unwilling to connect, I threw myself into self-indulgence. Yet here we were, Riley's hand brushing against mine as we shared stories of childhood memories tied to family dinners, laughter spilling out like the plentiful boxes of food surrounding us. It was a different kind of feast, sharing our vulnerabilities and dreaming of brighter futures over plates filled not just with vibrant salads but with hope and intention. As summer began to paint the park with lush hues of green, we found ourselves more inclined to leave the comfort of our home-cooked meals behind in favor of leisurely afternoons beneath the rustling trees. There was something so liberating about laying down the picnic blanket and unpacking lunch, free of the stress that once accompanied food. We had taken to experimenting with healthy recipes together, and the process itself became an adventure. We would stroll through the local farmer's market, picking out ripe avocados and fresh herbs, savoring the air laced with the aroma of baked bread and blooming flowers. Our shared experiences began to nourish us in ways I hadn't anticipated. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. One afternoon, after a particularly grueling week of work for both of us, I felt the familiar pang of anxiety creep in. I had stepped on the scale only to find a number I hadn't seen in a long while, and though I had tried to shake it off, the weight of that digit hung in the air, threatening to overshadow the joy I felt with Riley. I found myself retreating inward, worry spiraling like a whirlpool, and I could sense the change. Riley, ever perceptive, noticed my silence during a picnic, my mind racing with comparisons, doubts, and a precarious sense of failure. "Hey, Riley said softly, pulling a cluster of cherry tomatoes from our spread. "What's going on in that head of yours?" The concern in their voice snapped me back like a rubber band against skin. I hesitated, but the gentle nudging of their understanding eyes coaxed the truth out of me. I stepped on the scale. "I don't know how I feel about it," I whispered, the vulnerability stirring a wave of unease in my chest. To my surprise, Riley didn't dismiss my worry. Instead, they shifted closer, inputting warmth and acceptance into a moment where I might have anticipated judgment. "It's okay to feel that way. But remember the journey we're on. It's not about the numbers. We're doing this together." And in that exchange, something shifted. For the first time, I realized that Riley wasn't just my anchor but my partner. There was an intertwining of our struggles and triumphs that made the journey so much richer. As we shared our fears and insecurities beneath the dappled sunlight, I found comfort in the shared humanity of struggles. Facing the truths laid bare, I understood that weight comes not just from the body but from the emotional baggage that clings to us. With every heartfelt conversation, every laugh shared over a simple meal, we were queuing up all those intricate layers of connection that overshadowed the fleeting discomfort of a number on a scale. As autumn approached, we made it a point to continue our tradition. Every weekend, we would dig deeper into treasured recipes, while each meal crafted blossomed with discovery and meaning. I transitioned to viewing food as a source of connection, establishing routines that nurtured not just our bodies, but also the bonds that fortified our hearts. The idea of weight shifted entirely. It morphed into a celebration of resilience, companionship, and perhaps most importantly, the magic of transformation. An update on our story came when Riley surprised me one early Saturday morning with a phone call. "Hey, I've got an idea that could spice things up for our volunteering." Their voice held excitement, and curiosity swirled within me as I listened. "What if we organized a community cook-off at the food bank? We can involve everyone we've met, share recipes, culture, and celebrate food as we have, but on a larger scale, allowing them a chance to share their stories too." A thrill of ideas cascaded within me. Naturally, I threw myself into the project with gusto, helping to plan out details and gather ingredients. So, when the day finally arrived, a sense of pride bloomed within me as I watched the community come together, laughter echoing in the harvested sunlight, stories flowing as flowingly as the various dishes that filled each table. Riley and I exchanged satisfied glances amidst the fray, our hands gripping tightly as we relished this moment that seemed to signify a milestone in our journey, a festival committed to connection, nurtured through the ingredients of love, support, and resilience. I realized the true measure of weight isn't found on a scale, but in the richness of relationships we foster along the way. It's in the laughter that resonates in our memories and the connections that nourish our deepest selves, an intricate tapestry woven together one experience at a time. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting a warm golden hue over the bustling festival grounds, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for the path Riley and I had carved out together. The laughter of children spun joyfully in the air, drifting past the aromatic stalls filled with local produce, arts, and crafts. It was a community united in celebration, where each vendor wore a smile as bright as the colors of their wares. I couldn't help but breathe deeply, taking in the savory scents wafting from the food stalls, barbecue smoke mingling with sweet notes of freshly baked pastries. With every passing moment, I savored not just the comforting flavors that tasted of home, but also the warmth of Riley's hand in mine, our fingers interlaced like the vines wrapping around the nearby oak trees. When we made our way over to a small booth selling homemade jam, the elderly woman behind the counter welcomed us with a twinkling smile. Her hands were calloused yet gentle as she showed us the vibrant labels, each depicting a different fruit imbued with stories of sun-soaked days and summer whispers. "This one's made from the first strawberries of spring," she said, her voice nostalgic as she handed us a small sample. As we tasted the sweet spread, I could see Riley's face light up, and in that moment, I was reminded of how far we had come, how filling our lives with love and connection was beginning to replace the emptiness that once sat heavy in my own heart. After a leisurely stroll through the festival, we settled on a patch of grass beneath a sprawling sycamore tree, its branches offering a comforting canopy. Riley unpacked our homemade picnic, a collection of vibrant salads and hearty sandwiches, all crafted from ingredients we had picked up together at the food bank's community garden. The sun filtered through the leaves, dappled light playing on our faces as we shared bites and stories, laughter spilling between us like an uncontainable river. "You know," Riley began, crossing her legs beneath her, "it's strange to think how food used to connect us in a different way, isn't it? I remember all the late-night takeout and how it was always more about escaping the day than really celebrating anything." I nodded, understanding all too well how those nights were often marked by solitude and the clinking of takeout containers rather than warmth and conversation. "Yeah," I replied softly, "it's almost like we used food to fill the spaces we didn't know how to navigate emotionally." We were both silent for a moment, the hum of festival laughter in the distance grounding us as we processed those feelings. It was liberating to acknowledge our past without letting it define us. Riley reached out and placed her palm on my cheek, bringing my gaze back to her. "But look at us now, creating new memories, giving new meaning to those moments. That's what it's about, right? Learning to nourish ourselves in every sense of the word." Her eyes sparkled with a mixture of hope and determination, emboldening me to step further into this newfound journey with her. With dusk settling in, the festival exploded to life with flickering lights strung across the trees, illuminating the path of laughter and connection all around us. We moved from stall to stall, sharing bites of gourmet grilled cheese and sipping on fresh apple cider as the sky transformed into a canvas of purples and blues. Every moment felt imbued with the lessons we had learned, the importance of intentionally, of savoring not just food but the quiet magic woven into relationships. And in that bustling atmosphere, it dawned on me just how much I had been missing, how easy it had been to get lost in my own solitude, yet how deeply transformative it was to lay aside old habits and embrace vulnerability. As we leaned against each other on a bench, our bellies full and hearts even fuller, I knew that this was just the beginning. In my heart, I felt a shift, an understanding that life was not just about the meals we shared but also the people who enriched those moments, who brought flavor and vibrancy to the everyday. Our journey together echoed the very essence of a bustling market, a beautiful blend of the familiar and the unexplored, the laughter of a newfound connection taking center stage in our lives. Later, as the sounds of the festival faded and the stars twinkled brightly above, I came to realize that the joy of our partnership would continue to thrive. I turned to Riley. "I can't imagine doing this without you. This feels too right." She smiled, leaning in closer, the warmth of her body providing both comfort and strength as she whispered, "We're in this together, always." I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the weight of her words settle in, a vow of sorts, echoing the harmony we had woven into our lives through love, resilience, and the steady rhythm of shared moments. The true measure of weight was indeed not confined to a scale, but rather the delightful burden of connection we carried, woven tightly with each experience we chose to embrace. There are moments in life that shimmer with an irrepressible magic, etching themselves into the fabric of our memory, and sometimes they arrive when we least expect them. It all started on a rainy Wednesday, the kind where the sky drips gray and the world feels muted, a perfect excuse to stay in, wrapped in blankets with a book and a cup of tea. I had just broken up with Jake, a charming guy with a smile that could light up a room, but an emotional distance that left me feeling cold. I spent days mulling over our disintegration, wondering how it had gone from sweet promises whispered over candlelit dinners to awkward silences filled with things unsaid. It was in this fog of introspection that my phone buzzed. A notification from a book club app that I barely kept up with. Intrigued, I opened it to find a message from someone I had never conversed with before, a fellow member named Marcus. He had posted something simple, asking for recommendations on books about personal growth. My curiosity piqued, I tapped out a response, hinting at the layers of complexity I found in books like The Alchemist and Atomic Habits. I didn't expect the conversation to continue, but Marcus replied almost immediately, elaborating on his personal struggles and how literature had been a refuge for him during tough times. What unfolded over the next hour was an exchange unlike any I'd experienced before. He spoke openly about vulnerability and the importance of self-reflection, qualities often overlooked in our fast-paced lives. Each message felt like unwrapping a gift, revealing parts of himself wrapped in honesty and warmth. As the clock silently marked the passing hours, I felt an electric connection begin to spark through the weighted silence that had settled over my heart since Jake. I learned that Marcus was a teacher at a local school, dedicated to helping students find their passion, a fact that resonated with me deeply. It was refreshing to see someone who wanted to make a difference, not just in the classroom but as a person. He shared anecdotes of his students, the struggles they faced, and how life had shaped him into someone who believes in the power of kindness, not because he had to, but because he genuinely wanted to. That emotional depth was intoxicating. When I reluctantly closed my phone that night, a sense of contentment washed over me, replacing the anxiety I had been harboring. Little did I know, this new friendship would take me through a powerful transformation. Over the next few weeks, we would exchange thoughts on everything from life philosophies to the best local coffee spots, finding a rhythm that felt just right. But one sunny Saturday morning, he asked if I wanted to grab coffee in person. My heart raced, This was the moment to step away from the comfort of screens and into uncharted territory. I stared at my reflection in the mirror, feeling both a rush of anticipation and a tremor of doubt. What if it was a disaster? What if the chemistry did not translate beyond the brightly lit screens? Steeling myself, I agreed, buoyed by the hope that had rooted itself so deeply in my chest. The day of our meeting dawned bright and clear, a stark contrast to the uncertainty brewing inside me. As I sat across from Marcus in a cozy cafe, the sunlight filtering through the large windows casting warm light across the rustic wooden tables, I felt an unexpected wave of calm. We chatted as if we were old friends, the conversation flowing effortlessly, punctuated by infectious laughter that drew curious glances from other patrons. Slowly, I began to see glimpses of the person behind the messages, the vulnerability in his eyes when he spoke of personal losses, the passion that ignited his tone when discussing his hopes for his students. It was crystal clear that this was a man who cared deeply about the world and all its intricacies. However, the moment that stood out the most was when, in the middle of a conversation about a favorite book, Marcus caught sight of a homeless man outside the cafe, holding a cardboard sign. Rather than ignore him, Marcus excused himself and walked outside, speaking to the man in hushed tones. I watched, a mix of admiration and bewilderment washing over me, as he handed him the contents of his own lunch, an exquisite Black Forest sandwich he had just ordered with extra care. He returned, a soft smile on his face, but my heart felt heavy with the realization of the depth of his character. This was someone who saw people, really saw them. The world blurred momentarily, I could barely process the warmth that flooded my chest, a mix of respect and affection that had come out of nowhere. As we continued to talk, I found myself hoping for a future intertwined with this respectful, kind-hearted man, and my mind drifted back to Jake and the many things that led to our unraveling. I learned that sometimes, it's those little moments, like sharing a meal or acknowledging someone who might usually go unnoticed, that truly illustrate a person's worth. Days turned into weeks, and we began dating, exploring local parks, attending literature events, and discovering art galleries together. Every encounter deepened my belief that I had stumbled upon something rare with Marcus, his kindness casting shadows on my previous relationships. It took time, but with openness, he encouraged me to embrace my emotions, no longer feeling the need to cloak them in pretense. I often found myself reflecting on that rainy night when we first connected, wondering if my decision to engage in a simple conversation had altered the course of my life. It made me realize that sometimes, it simply takes one person to truly understand you to change everything. And just when I thought life couldn't surprise me any longer, Marcus announced he had signed up for a local volunteering program that aimed to help feed those in need. Without hesitation, I joined him. Together, we cooked, prepared meals, and served food, with the hope that we would one day be part of the change that transcended beyond our cafe conversations. Life keeps rolling forward, the days falling like leaves from a tree, each one different yet evolving beautifully in its own right. So here I sit, grateful for vulnerability, for connection, and for a man who took a moment to care, not just for the words I shared, but for the humanity around him. Perhaps I would still be wrapped in blankets, searching for something I had lost, if not for a simple notification on a dreary day. After all, isn't that how life unfolds? You just have to be present for the magic. I find myself in a cozy corner of my living room, the soft glow of the fairy lights wrapping around the walls like a comforting embrace. I had long resigned myself to the idea of solitude, filling my evenings with stories woven from the threads of fiction and the dim light of my imagination. My mornings danced to the monotonous tune of coffee brewing and emails pinging. It was a rhythm I knew well, but one that seemed to grind on my spirit with each passing week. Until that day at the cafe, sitting across from Mark, I had thought that perhaps my story was one of quiet solitude, a life observed from the sidelines. But he disrupted that narrative effortlessly with his warmth and authenticity, like a sudden ray of sun breaking through a cloudy sky. He listened, really listened, as I shared tales of my fears and aspirations, his dark eyes reflecting a genuine curiosity that was contagious. I remember a particularly rainy afternoon, the sound of droplets tap dancing against the cafe window while I unwrapped layers of my heart. I spoke of feeling lost in my work, of wanting to venture beyond the confines of my comfort zone yet being tethered to the security of familiarity. As I finished, I caught a faint smile dancing on his lips. "You know," he said softly, "the only real boundaries we face are the ones we impose on ourselves. What if you took that leap? What if you stepped into the unknown?" His words hung in the air, and I pondered them long after the cafe closed that day, echoing through my thoughts like a persistent melody. In the weeks that followed, our meetups became a salvation from the loneliness that loomed beyond my walls. His insights were not just words, they were keys that began to unlock doors inside me. With each conversation, the branches of my worldview expanded, reaching toward experiences I had once thought were impossible. I started exploring painting, something I had tried once in high school but dismissed as a failure, the shame of that long ago critique by a judge too stingy to appreciate the art of the moment. Inspired by Mark's encouragement, I splashed colors on canvas, my brushes dancing with joy and uncertainty, the very essence of vulnerability spilling forth in vivid hues. The act of creating became a sanctuary, a place where I found myself unmasking layers built over the years. One evening, as we chatted and sipped tea in my favorite cafe, Mark shared a turning point in his own life, a story so eerily parallel to mine yet uniquely different, rooted in struggles and triumphs that made me appreciate him even more. He had faced his own demons, and instead of running away, he dove deeper, confronting them as one confronts a storm. That night, I suddenly felt a connection stretching beyond friendship, ignited by openness and honesty, as we shared pieces of ourselves we had held tightly to for far too long. Yet, the fear of complicating this connection whispered doubts in my mind. Was it foolish to long for something more, to risk what we had built? But as Mark and I delved deeper into discussions, about dreams that loomed just out of reach, fears that felt insurmountable, and possibilities that seemed to shimmer like stars on a clear night, I realized that with him, there was a comfort in vulnerability, a safety net woven from mutual respect and shared experiences. The shift was subtle yet profound, and one day, as we savored the rich aroma of freshly ground coffee, I found my heartbeat racing. "Mark," I started, my voice steady through the tremor of anticipation, "do you think it's possible for friends to become something more?" The atmosphere thickened with tension, yet beneath it lay an unspoken promise. His gaze didn't falter, instead, it softened, and in that beautiful, breathless moment, everything shifted once again. "I was hoping you'd say that," he replied, a grin breaking the seriousness of his expression. In the haze of that afternoon, I felt as if our lives were threads being stitched into a larger tapestry, each stitch vibrant and alive. And just like that, the prospects of love, connection, and belonging became a canvas we painted together. As I reflect on this journey, I realize it was about more than just a simple attraction or shared cups of coffee. It became about rediscovering myself, about exploring the concept of vulnerability in relationships. Mark taught me that sometimes, when we allow ourselves to be seen, we invite not only connection but also the chance to grow, to evolve into versions of ourselves we haven't yet met. Perhaps, in the end, it was never just about him being different, but about how, through him, I could discover the facets of my own heart that had long been shrouded in shadows. That dreary day I received that notification felt like a distant memory now, buried under layers of laughter and shared dreams. I hold on to hope, not just for what's to come, but for the beauty found in simply being present for all that life has to offer. And as I lay in the quiet of my softly lit room, I can't help but smile, knowing that the simplest of moments can unfurl the most profound transformations, leaving us to wonder just how many other connections lie waiting, just outside the door of our comfort zones, ready to blossom if only we open ourselves up to the magic. As I basked in that tranquil moment, my reflection danced in the dusklit window, a reminder of a time I often replayed in my mind. I thought back to the first day I met Milo, the boy who burst into my life like a sudden summer rain, refreshing and unexpected. It was a chilly Tuesday afternoon, the kind of day where even the warmth of the coffee shop ticked just a bit too low on the thermostat, the scent of cinnamon laced throughout but feeling lost in the gloom. I sat hunched over my laptop, shrouded in layers of my emotional fortitude, consumed by words that refused to flow. Above the dull hum of the espresso machine, the world outside dimmed with the encroaching evening, and my thoughts tossed themselves around in chaotic knots. Just then, I heard the door swing open, and an unfamiliar face stepped in, glancing around until his gaze landed on a solitary empty table near mine. Even from a distance, I knew he was different. There was a spark of genuine curiosity in his eyes, a warm glimmer that rippled through the cafe as he settled into his chair. His hair was tousled, and his clothes looked slightly rumpled, but it was the quiet confidence in his demeanor that captured my attention. Milo pulled out a sketchbook, its pages filled with intricate doodles, and as he began to draw, the world around him seemed to fade into the background. I couldn't help but steal glances at his art, each stroke of his pencil revealing stories I yearned to know, stories that whispered to me as they met the paper. In a twist of courage buoyed by curiosity, I leaned over a little, letting my eyes devour the depth of his creativity. He noticed me, his brow raising in a friendly challenge, and unexpectedly, he grinned, that lovely, boyish grin illuminating his face. "You look like you could use a little inspiration," he said, inviting me into his enchanting world with a playful confidence. What drew me in was not just his talent but the way he didn't shy away from the connection. He took the chance to spark conversation, and before long, our shared laughter unraveled the tension that had gripped my heart. Hours slipped by unnoticed. We swapped stories, my struggles, his quiet dreams of an artist's life somewhere vibrantly outside these cafe walls, and I found myself unwinding like a tightly wound spring, revealing pieces of my heart I had nearly forgotten. It felt surreal, almost like I was stepping off a path I had walked for far too long, wandering into new territory where warmth and kindness danced around us like fireflies lighting the dusk. Our discussions flowed effortlessly, and with every sentence, a burgeoning friendship unfurled like petals kissed awake by the sun. As we parted that day, I didn't just walk back into the world outside, I crossed a threshold forged by connection, where vulnerabilities were shared and dreams no longer felt quite so distant. The weeks transformed into months, and our coffee shop became a beacon of ease amid the turbulence of life, an oasis of warmth where fears faded, replaced with dreams laid bare. With each encounter, I was met with expressions of empathy intertwined with gentle humor, and my initial hesitance melted. It was an awakening of the heart, discovering just how much healing resides in connection without pretense. The conversations meandered from our shared loves for art and music to the intricacies of life's struggles, loss, uncertainty, and the delicate dance of pursuing our passions. Each encounter felt like unwinding a thread, weaving together the fragmented pieces of our lives into a tapestry more vibrant than I ever anticipated. In this space, I uncovered what had been lurking within me, a long-buried desire for authenticity. I opened up about my fears, about how loneliness clung to me like a shadow, how I had long stopped believing I mattered. Yet, every time I shared, Milo listened more intently, his eyes reflecting empathy that brought warmth on even the coldest of days. In return, he would unfurl snippets of his own insecurities, tales of rejection as an artist, and the question of whether his passion would ever bear fruit. At this exchange, we somehow brewed a potion of mutual encouragement, our dreams blossoming within those small, safe moments where nothing felt insurmountable. And then, one fateful evening, under the soft, flickering candlelight of our usual table, Milo leaned across with a look that should have startled me, but instead felt like an inevitability. "You know," he said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper yet tinged with urgency, "you have this incredible light in you, and it feels as if you're ready to let it shine." My breath caught in my throat, his words pierced through me, exposing layers I had meticulously guarded. There it was, this gentle nudging that compelled me to confront my fears of inadequacy, notions of being forgotten, and the belief that perhaps it was time to step outside of the cocoon I had woven around myself. I felt emotions swirl, a blend of trepidation and elation, as he reached for my hand, an innocent gesture that connected us in a way far deeper than just two souls sharing dreams over coffee. It ignited something within me, this indescribable assurance that maybe I could contribute something beautiful to the world, that I had every right to occupy space. In that moment, as I sank deeper into his gaze, I realized I was in the midst of something so profoundly transformative, not solely because of him, but also because of my willingness to open up, to share the unfiltered truth of my heart. Even as I reminisce in my softly lit room now, with shadows dancing lightly across the walls, I know that everything shifted from that very first conversation. Milo not only encouraged me to explore my creativity but inspired a movement within me, lifting veils of doubt and replacing them with brushstrokes of hope and purpose. So here I lay, cherishing the beauty of life and love, knowing that vulnerability can lead to the most exquisite magic. Our journeys might intertwine in unexpected ways. But the truth remains, we are all just waiting for a little spark, for a connection that urges us to step fully into the light, reminding us that sometimes, the most beautiful transformations begin with a simple act of kindness. Confession: I did something terrible this past couple of weeks. It all started when I received a call from an old friend, Derek, someone I hadn't spoken to in years, and his voice felt like a distant echo of a happier time. We had been inseparable during our university days in an art program, dreaming of gallery shows and creative lives, but life had taken us down different paths. Derek moved to a bustling city to chase fame, while I settled back in our quiet hometown, working an unfulfilling job that barely allowed me to keep my modest apartment. When he called, it continued as a casual catch-up, where laughter mingled with nostalgia, but subtly there was something beneath his jovial tone, a weight. He was discouraged by how his art career was stagnating. He talked about unsuccessful exhibitions and a lack of inspiration, and with every word, a gnawing guilt unfurled inside me. You see, Derek was always the talented one, bold and expressive, while I lingered in his shadow, quietly scribbling away, sharing my works only with a select few, too afraid of criticism. He ended the call with an invitation. "Come visit," he said, "I need a fresh pair of eyes, a friend who believes in me." The excitement swallowed me whole, but along with that excitement was a pit of dread as I began to think about the situation more closely. When I arrived at his downtown loft, filled with canvases and clutter, I felt a strange cocktail of admiration and envy pulsing through my veins. He seemed so alive, but that spark of creativity I once knew looked like it was flickering out, and as I sat in his studio, watching him paint half-hearted strokes, I couldn't shake this voice in my head whispering that he might need a push. After a few days of playful banter and wine, I sat down with him one evening, the dim lights casting our shadows against the walls, and I revealed a secret I had kept for far too long. I had a collection of sketches and paintings that I knew could get him noticed, and for a fleeting moment, I believed I was doing the right thing. I borrowed pieces from my own portfolio and claimed them as unfinished works of his for one of the biggest local art events happening in a few weeks. My heart raced at the thought of heaving some semblance of success into his life, even if it was tangled in deception. Derek, eager yet oblivious, embraced the idea, turning the wheels of our old dreams as I created an email to submit the work while waiting through sleepless nights of nervous anticipation. The day of the exhibition arrived, and we stood shoulder to shoulder, our bones vibrating with excitement. The crowd was a blur, a tapestry of strangers and art lovers who came to whisper and ponder. My heart sank, melting under the weight of guilt every time someone praised the pieces as Derek's. I could feel his pride swelling with every compliment, yet all I could think about were the artists out there who had poured their souls into their work, unaware that their creativity was becoming a mask for my flaws. As the night progressed, I watched him flourish, drawing attention, and my heart ached as the applause solidified everything I had wrongfully constructed. I should have felt proud, yet each cheer drove a dagger further into my conscience. Did Derek deserve this? And what would happen when the truth unveiled itself? As the exhibition came to a close, the ominous specter of my deceit loomed large. The guilt I had buried began clawing its way to the surface, and I couldn't sleep those nights, my mind plagued with thoughts of what I had done. A week passed, and I knew I had to come clean. I told Derek about my deception in the cold light of dawn, our voices intermingling in a silence that felt heavier than words. He stared at me, shock morphing into a deep hurt, and suddenly I realized I had turned our friendship into a frayed thread hanging on to nothing. In that moment, all the laughter we had shared faded like the morning mist, and I could feel my world crumbling. Now, as I sit in my dimly lit apartment, I can't shake the guilt that has rooted itself into my bones. I wonder constantly if Derek, in all his talent, will find a way to forgive me, or if he will carry this betrayal like a stone in his pocket, a reminder of our broken bond. A part of me wishes I could take it all back, return to that moment when the lies began to weave themselves into our reality, but the truth is already out there, dancing in the ruins of what was once an innocent ambition. Derek hasn't contacted me since, and I doubt he ever will. I can only hope he finds his way back to the canvas, away from shadows of falsehood. So, here I confess, with no one left to share this burden with, an ache in my chest that serves as a reminder of the lines I crossed, and somewhere within, a flicker of hope that maybe next time, instead of reaching for validation, I'll have the courage to invite my friend to truly see me, and perhaps find healing in the genuine expression we both sought. Update: it's been a couple of months since that fateful night. I haven't spoken to Derek, but I recently saw him featured in an article about local artists making waves. He was collaborating with another artist, showcasing work that felt authentically him. I felt a strange mix of pride and heartbreak. He has continued to thrive, and now, I need to step back and allow him to own his narrative. I've begun to paint again, returning to my roots, but this time, I'm doing so with honesty, and although it feels like a small step, it's one towards becoming a better version of myself, one that refuses to tiptoe around the truth. Confession: I did something terrible this past couple of weeks. Looking back, it feels as if a fog has lifted, the air is clearer now, and I can finally see the contours of the mistakes I made. The truth is, though it felt like a suffocating weight for so long, I've begun to embrace the complexity of my emotions, transforming it into a canvas that reflects my journey. After that initial rush of seeing Derek's name splashed across the pages of that article, I made a promise to myself, not just to paint again, but to paint boldly. The same week, I decided to sign up for a local art class, held in a sun-drenched loft downtown. The teacher was this vibrant woman named Lila, who had an infectious enthusiasm that ignited a spark within me. In that studio, surrounded by misfit artists, college students, retirees, professionals turning dreams into night work, I felt a sense of belonging settle upon me like a warm shawl. Each brushstroke carried the weight of unspoken apologies and unprocessed emotions, and with every sigh of paint meeting canvas, I found fragments of my old self surfacing. However, amidst this catharsis, I couldn't entirely shake my guilt. I struggled with the realization that while I was finally becoming honest about my feelings and expressing them through art, I'd torn down the walls of another person without fully understanding the repercussions. I thought of Derek often, especially when Lila praised the way I bled emotion into my pieces, the raw truth of them echoing in the folds of color and shadow, yet I found no way to convey this internal tug-of-war during our brief, casual chats after class. Then, one evening as the last rays of sunlight dipped below the horizon and cast the studio in shadows, I picked up my brush to begin a new piece. My mind wandered to the last conversation Derek and I had before everything fell apart. I painted his favorite shade of blue, the deep, oceanic color that always reminded me of calm amidst chaos, and I poured into it everything, the heartbreak, the regret, the fleeting moments of happiness, and the darker, uglier truth of hindsight that I had ignored for too long. It was reckless, really, an emotional dumping ground, but it felt right in a world where I had tried so hard to control the narrative, to silence the chaos instead of embracing it. One night, while working late, I sat back and looked at the completed painting, an abstract representation of our tumultuous past, half void of clarity, half teeming with possibility. I was overwhelmed by the emotion that clung to it like dew, and just then, the unthinkable happened. Lila walked by, glanced at my canvas, and gasped. "This is incredible. You've captured a profound depth here," she said, and I felt both exhilaration and suffocating guilt twist in my stomach. Had I really just bared my soul, albeit unknowingly, to the world? Later, after class, I stayed behind, my heart hammering as I prepared to wrap my painting, intending to submit it for the upcoming showcase. The idea of sharing this piece with others terrified me. What if they saw the remnants of my mistakes, the pieces of Derek strewn across the canvas like lost puzzle pieces? I couldn't ignore the knot of anxiety that settled in my chest. Yet, primarily, I couldn't ignore the truth. This was about me reclaiming my own story. The showcase approached. Faster than I anticipated, and with it came a supposed peace of mind, knowing I was finally stepping into the light instead of lurking in the shadows. When the night finally arrived, I stood in front of my painting under the dim lights, watching as others lost themselves in its depth. Then, to my sheer astonishment, I saw Derek walk through the door, his face illuminated by surprise as he spotted my work. I was frozen, caught between the fear of his perception and the hope of a reconnection. He walked closer, weaving through the crowd, and when he reached my painting, his eyes widened and spoke without words. They flitted over the colors and shapes, and I saw the moment recognition flooded him. I felt my heart race with a mixture of dread and excitement at the thought of him seeing through the brushstrokes to the person behind it. The world around us shrank, and before I could say anything, he turned to me, vulnerability etched across his features. This is truly beautiful," he said, his voice steady yet soft. In that moment, I caught my breath and felt the weight lift, even if just for a heartbeat. I nodded, my throat tight. "It's everything I couldn't say before." His expression softened even more, sadness pooling in his warm brown eyes. "I didn't want to hurt you. It just happened." For a split second, we were draped in a shared silence, the past swirling between us, intricate and painful, yet oddly comforting in its familiarity. Slowly, cautiously, we began to discuss our journeys over the past few months, how he had channeled his creative energy into collaborations and how I had turned mine into this raw honesty, and as we spoke, I realized the gap that had once felt impossible to bridge was narrowing. There would not be a tidy resolution or a perfectly wrapped ending, but in our open exchange, I could sense the flicker of hope, the possibility of both healing and understanding going forward. Our paths had diverged in ways we hadn't expected, yet there was still a part of us that needed to navigate this newfound honesty together. In the days that followed, we began to reconnect, vulnerable yet cautious, allowing ourselves grace as we rediscovered each other in the light of what we had both created, art crafted from pain and resilience. I think back on that time now with a bittersweet reminiscence, allowing myself the space to feel pride for how far I've come. I still paint, still share, and still embrace the unfolding narrative of my story. I've learned to let the brush speak for me while crafting my own truth under the ever-turning canvas of life, one brushstroke at a time. As the days turned into weeks, my small home studio became my sanctuary, a place where I allowed every emotion to spill forth onto the canvas. The soft hum of my music intertwined with the whispers of distant storms rolling outside, and each time I dipped my brush into the vibrant hues of my thoughts, it felt as if I were shedding the layers of my old self. I began to explore themes of connection and disconnection, joy and sorrow, using colors that embodied the spectrum of human experience. The canvases seemed to breathe with life, and I often found myself lost in the process, the world around me fading away as I immersed myself in this newfound dialogue between heart and hand. One afternoon, while layering a particularly haunting shade of blue, representing the cool depth of longing, I received a text from Derek. It was simple, yet profound. Would you like to see the gallery showing next weekend? I'd love to hear your thoughts. My heart raced and my hands trembled, both from excitement and the weight of what was about to unfold. I hadn't seen him in person since that split, and while I yearned for connection, I feared where it might lead us. Still, I clicked the response button before my hesitation could echo in my thoughts. I'd love to, Derek. I'm excited to see your work. The exchange felt innocuous, but I knew better. Beneath the surface of those words lay the years of friendship we had shared, the love that remained like a ghost between us, and the unspoken wounds yearning for closure. As the day approached, I busied myself painting, though each stroke felt laced with the nerves bubbling beneath my skin. I imagined what Derek's work would look like, how he would have evolved as an artist, and what stories he would share with his audience. The gallery was vibrant with life, walls decorated with familiar motifs that I remembered from our own collaborations, yet something was notably different. This felt like a powerful shift in both his art and our relationship. When I arrived, I spotted him from across the room, standing tall beside his latest pieces, the space around him a swirl of admirers. I hesitated, feeling like an intruder at a celebration I wasn't sure I belonged in. But then, he turned, and our eyes met. Time seemed to pause for just a heartbeat as we shared a moment of recognition. I could see the vulnerability masked behind his professional demeanor, the same vulnerability we had both learned to navigate through our respective art. I approached slowly, as if stepping onto a canvas for the first time, unsure of the exact colors I might find. Your work is incredible, Derek, I finally said, my voice steady as I gestured toward a piece that captured the tension of an elusive connection. I love how you've portrayed the struggle. His smile was warm, but there was a flicker of something deeper, perhaps surprise, or perhaps relief. Thank you. It means a lot to hear that from you. I've really poured myself into it. After exchanging pleasantries that echoed our careful steps into this newly redefined friendship, we began to walk along the gallery, his commentary painting the air with anecdotes of his experiences. I shared lighter stories of my own artistic journey, how the frame of my paintings had now found a wider scope, filled with the honesty I'd only just begun to embrace. As the evening went on, and glasses clinked with laughter, I felt the familiar warmth of camaraderie blossoming between us, rekindled and infused with this raw sincerity. The night turned surreal, wrapping around us in a comforting blanket of shared histories and dreams yet unshared. But just as I began to feel the old comfort of our connection return, there was a pause, a moment where silence fell, not awkward, but contemplative. He turned to me, eyes searching, and asked, "What was the hardest part for you?" After it all ended, I inhaled deeply, feeling the gravity of his question settle between us. This wasn't just a conversation, this was a reckoning, a step into vulnerability. Honestly? Letting go of the guilt, I confessed, finding the words as they formed in my mind. I painted about it, how it felt to feel like a thief of happiness. It was hard to accept that I was part of the pain. He nodded, understanding, lighting his features. You weren't a thief, you were a person caught in a difficult place. I was too. We both were. His hand brushed against mine, just a slip of connection, but it felt monumental, crackling with potential. I've had to forgive myself for not being strong enough to handle things differently. We can only grow from where we start. In that moment, under the glow of the gallery lights, amid the scent of fresh paint and polished wood, I realized how much I had learned in this journey. The shadows of our past no longer loomed with the same weight, instead, they became part of the intricate patterns of our ongoing story. As we parted that night, having exchanged not just pleasantries but deeper truths, I felt a sense of closure wash over me, perhaps not the end of a chapter, but the beginning of a new one, an evolution of the relationship we thought had faded. And so, as I returned to the studio, my heart felt lighter, ready to embrace whatever was next, understanding that honesty, like art, requires time to fully develop. The brush continued to find its rhythm in my hand as I created not just paintings, but a new narrative, a reflection of comfort, growth, and the unyielding beauty of connection, all witnessed on the canvas of our lives, where every stroke told a story. A few weeks later, I would find myself back at that gallery for another showing, this time not merely an observer but an active participant in a narrative we were crafting together, hand in hand through paint and memories, finding solace in the acknowledgement that every ending births a new beginning. There's a certain thrill that comes from the idea of having a carefree night in a wildly adventurous setting, free from the judgments of the everyday world, and I had always fantasized about what it would be like to be caught in a whirlwind romance with a stranger in an exotic locale. That thought lingered in the back of my mind for years, stoked by the countless movies I consumed and the endless stories floating through my social circles. But when I finally found the courage to act on one of my fantasies, I discovered the harsh realities lurking just beneath the surface. It all started when I moved to a new city after college, where everything felt fresh and full of promise. I had just landed a new job that required frequent travel, mostly to glamorous destinations, and one night in Barcelona, after a long day of meetings, I decided to embrace the moment. The warm night air was alive with music and laughter, and I was drawn into a crowded bar pulsating with energy. There, I met him, a charismatic artist with a mischievous glint in his eye and an accent that made my knees weak. He was everything my fantasies had promised, charming, spontaneous, and utterly intoxicating. We danced under the low lights, sharing stories that wove our lives together while the world faded around us. I felt alive for the first time in ages, intoxicated not just by the sangria but by the possibility that I was shedding my mundane reality for something vibrant and exhilarating. As the night deepened, he leaned in closer, whispering promises of adventure and intimacy. I could feel the tension sparking between us, a magnetic pull that made my heart race. Finally, in a haze of desire, we left the bar together, stumbling through dimly lit streets towards the nearest hotel, our laughter echoing off the cobblestones. But as the dawn broke over the city, the fantasy began to unravel. The morning light highlighted the disarray of my choice, and the artist wasn't the smooth romantic I'd pictured. His carefree facade slipped as he started talking about his commitments, his art, and his struggles with mental health. I felt the heavy weight of reality settle over us like a thick fog. Instead of a wild escape, I found myself in a deep discussion that made me acutely aware of the fragility of our encounter. I wanted to run, but there was compassion bubbling within me, urging me to listen and be present, and I struggled with the genuine connection contrasting starkly with the idealized moment I'd envisioned. I felt a rush of panic as I realized that this whirlwind had become a wave threatening to drown me. I was falling for the man behind the fantasy, not just the figure in my dreams, and as we talked, I was faced with the choice of whether to embrace this new reality or cling to the illusion of a carefree evening. Ultimately, I chose connection over escapism. We shared our fears, dreams, and vulnerabilities, and while we parted ways at noon, exchanging hesitant smiles and promises to keep in touch, I was left contemplating the nature of my fantasy and the truth we often overlook. Reflecting on that night, I realized that sometimes fantasies are not merely about pleasure or thrill, they can reveal deeper truths about ourselves, our yearnings for connection, understanding, and shared experience. I returned home feeling both liberated and unsettled, admiring how life rarely unfolds according to our plans. I don't think I'll ever forget him or the raw authenticity of our meeting. A few months later, I received a message from him, a simple "How are you?" followed by a photo of a new painting he'd created, something he claimed was inspired by our conversation. I smiled, knowing that the reality was so much richer than the fantasy, and wondered how many others were out there, living in the shadows of their own dreams. As I reflected on that night, I felt a sense of warmth, realizing that it wasn't a nightmare but a beautiful awakening, one that taught me to cherish the imperfections that make life so compelling. The days turned into weeks, and our exchanges evolved into something more profound. Each message from him felt like a gentle ripple in the still waters of my life, nudging me awake from the humdrum routine I had settled into. We shared fragments of our worlds, documenting every laugh, every desire, and every brush of vulnerability that came alive in our conversations. I began to look forward to our nightly chats, my heart dancing at the thought of unveiling the layers of his mind, and I started weaving him into my dreams. The reality was intoxicating, contrasting sharply with the fantasies I had once indulged in, where everything was steamy and perfect, a performance crafted to delight. This was different, it was raw and authentic, filled with the potential for connection and depth rather than mere physical encounters. There was a kind of magic in the imperfections that crept into our exchanges, like when I stumbled over my words, or he shared a painting that seemed incomplete, an echo of whispers and lines that spoke loudly, but lacked the finish and polish I had envisioned. One evening, during one of our lengthy dialogues, I felt the urge to broach the subject of reality. I wanted to tread carefully, though, knowing how easily dreams can shatter under the weight of expectations. What do you think about exploring our fantasies further? I typed, my fingers trembling slightly as I hit send, the question hanging in the digital air between us like a conversation held at a cafe, the scent of coffee and pastries wafting around us. I braced myself. Would he take it as a playful suggestion, or would he see it for what it was, a gentle nudge toward the frayed edges of reality? His reply came quicker than I anticipated, a simple "I've thought about it too. But part of me fears losing what we have." Those words echoed in my mind for days. We were treading on a precipice, hovering between the perfect fantasy we had built and the genuine connection that was blossoming. Part of me wanted to dive headfirst into the chaos of it all, to explore every nuance of our desires, to drunk press those fantasies into reality. But another part of me clung desperately to the warmth and safety of our words. What if the tangibility of our dreams bled the colors out of what was already vivid? The notion of it being a nightmare replayed in my thoughts. It was so easy to dance around the idea of passion when it was wrapped tightly in the cocoon of screens and distance. But what if, when stripped bare, the reality fell flat, an unfinished painting revealed under the hard light of day? Eventually, after scribbling tentative messages in my mind, I took a deep breath and pressed forward. What do you want to see happen? The question was a leap into the unknown, and I felt lighter yet heavier with the weight of it. I wondered if I caught a hint of hesitation in his response, a flicker of uncertainty that made my heart race and pulse thud against my chest. "I want to get to know the real you, beyond the words," he wrote, and I felt an overwhelming warmth spread within me, a craving that stretched beyond mere physicality. Weeks passed. Our dialogues traversed the spectrum of feelings, ranging from innocent musings on artistic inspiration to deep dives into the intricacies of commitment. We lost ourselves in stories of past loves, future dreams, and those midnight confessions that spilled out like secrets beneath the stars. Yet, I sensed a contention hanging over us, a question we were avoiding. I could almost hear it, that whisper of destiny. What would it mean to turn this cartoonish dream of skinny dipping in a warm ocean into a picturesque illusion? And then, one rainy evening in late autumn, a soft invitation came nudging into my inbox. How about meeting in person? The proposition shimmered before me like the glow of an uncertain flame, and I found myself grinning, then quickly frowning. My heart raced, anticipation clawing at my insides. Could I step into the canvas we'd painted together, or was that the moment when everything would dissolve? I could almost see it, the fantasy stretching out like a beautiful, uncharted horizon before me, pulling me in, while simultaneously pushing me away with the heavy weight of reality. Days of contemplation curled around me like smoke, each twist and turn of thought compelling me onward until I had crafted a response that both terrified and thrilled me. Yes. It hung in my mind like a fragile spell, one word laden with promise and dread. We settled on a small art gallery nestled on the quiet outskirts of town, a space drenched in creative energy, where the paintings were lively, and the atmosphere felt ethereal, scattering the lingering doubts like scattered leaves in the wind. The day of our meeting arrived, and 1,000 butterflies danced in my stomach as I entered the gallery, the smell of fresh paint mingling with the smells of rain and warming spices. The initial thrill fluttering in my chest was marred with a thick layer of apprehension. Would we get lost in each other's eyes, or was I stepping into an awkward situation destined to slip back into the shadows? But then I saw him, standing just beneath a sprawling canvas, blue in swirls of deeper hues that echoed the depths of my mind. Our eyes met, and the world faded into a quiet hum. The moment was surreal, bursting with an intensity I had not anticipated. We spent those hours enveloped in conversation, laughter echoing in the small space. I shared thoughts on art, he chuckled at my nervous stumbles, and for every word we exchanged, I felt the invisible thread tying us draw tighter. We painted a new story together, one that was only beginning to emerge from the canvas of our dreams, no longer constrained by the pixels that had connected us. When our hands brushed, I felt warm currents of electricity. It was clear that we were both aware of the tightrope we walked above an abyss of uncertainty, but the magic of the moment kept us tethered. As the evening wound down and twilight seeped into the gallery, we stepped outside, the world outside appearing softer, illuminated under the gentle glow of street lamps. A wave of real, tangible affection washed over me, fueling the moment with a quiet, electrifying promise. There was no fantasy tearing at the seams, no crumbling reality demanding attention. Just two people taking a chance, creating a story marked not by the typical markers of romance or lust, but by the foundations of honesty and friendship. Months later, I lay in bed, replaying the memories of his laughter and our first meaningful kiss, still enveloped in the sweetness of that night. What could have easily devolved into a nightmare instead turned into the core of a thriving journey, one that transformed our shared dreams into a fragile reality, delicate yet beautiful. With every shared moment and vulnerability, we crafted a version of ourselves that was, and always would be, infinitely richer than anything I had found before, reminding me that sometimes it's the unpredictable chaos of life that blooms into the kind of connection we often yearn for in our fantasies. And as I drifted off to sleep, I allowed the bittersweet wonder of it all to embrace me. In the quiet chambers of my mind, shadows of the past faded, replaced with the whispers of dreams yet to be realized, knowing fully that those fantasies, when touched by honesty, could morph into something stunningly, satisfyingly real. That night marked a turning point in my life, each thought spiraling gracefully into the next as I imagined the small changes I could embrace. I often found myself daydreaming about our conversation, the flow of ideas, the laughter interwoven with vulnerability. It became a tapestry of emotions that I would revisit on quiet evenings when the world outside dimmed into a soft glow. I replayed his words, the way he spoke about art and humanity. Folding my own little insecurities into the fabric of our connection, feeling a sense of permission to embrace my chaotic self. Days turned into weeks, and it astonished me how something so serendipitous could linger like the taste of a fine wine, warm and intoxicating. Every text he sent painted another layer in my mind, a canvas I didn't know I had, each exchange revealing the raw essence of two souls entangled in shared dreams. I began to see my life differently. Instead of the linear paths I had always walked, I found myself wandering into serendipitous alleys of adventure and self-discovery. Then, one evening, as rain drizzled softly against my window panes, my phone buzzed with a familiar rhythm. It was him again, this time asking if I'd like to see his latest exhibit, a showcase he had planned for months in a quaint gallery downtown. My heart raced at the thought. Compared to the previous vague illusions of intimacy through our screens, this was a real-world challenge, a shift from fantasy to reality, a chance to interact beyond the confines of our carefully curated words. I hesitated, nervous about stepping out of my comfort zone. What if we encountered the rawness of existence that often lay beyond the realm of our beautiful exchanges? What if it didn't measure up, shattering the soft cocoon we had spun around each other? But the allure of authenticity won the battle within, and I found myself standing before the gallery a few days later, curiosity blooming inside me as I entered the softly lit space. Colors danced on the walls, each painting embodying a story I hadn't lived, but could feel resonating deep within my heart. And there he was, standing proud amidst his canvases, a mix of nervousness and passion radiating from him like a beacon. Our eyes locked, and in that instant, the world around us faded. It was just the two of us, our connection flourishing amidst the strokes of paint and splashes of color. As we navigated through his works, he explained the inspiration behind each piece, his passion electric. I shared my thoughts too, hesitant but emboldened by the beauty around us and the contrast of our conversations that had now grown into something palpable. Yet, amidst the joy of discovery, I noticed a peculiar unease creeping in, a recognition of the thin line we were treading between fantasy and our very real lives. Suddenly, the idealistic images I had conjured up began to waver, revealing the intricacies of human connection that were not always as simple as they appeared in my dreams. It happened during a soft, spontaneous laugh shared over one of his more abstract pieces, which to me seemed chaotic and whimsical, yet to him symbolized the emotional wreckage of lost love and anger. In that moment, the laughter curdled slightly, revealing glimpses of his real-world complexity. As he bore his soul, shadows flickered in his eyes, hints of struggles and disappointments that his art had masked until now. The fantasy I had wrapped around him of the flawless artist who could lead me into a world painted with sunshine, began to reveal a semblance of darkness that mirrored my own. Feeling a rush of vulnerability, I opened up too, speaking of my own tribulations, the tightrope of expectations holding me hostage in my own life. As the evening unfolded, the layers of our conversations peeled back, leaving room for honesty but also a sense of hesitance, an unsteady dance of vulnerability that felt both exhilarating and terrifying. Our connection deepened that night but was underscored by the ever-present reminder of our fears and insecurities, that perhaps the very beauty we sought was intertwined with the truths we often shied away from. And finally, as we exited the gallery, the gentle rain had morphed into a light drizzle, cascading down like whispered confessions. Walking side by side without a clear destination, I realized it was okay to embrace the unknown, finding solace in the warmth of his presence. The night felt alive, charged with the potential for shared dreams but also the weight of reality pressing down on us. As we reached a quiet park, The moonlight spilled across the grass, illuminating a space where we could stand still for a moment, allowing the hum of the city to fade into the background. I turned to look at him, and in the silent exchange, I understood. The beauty of our connection was not in the idealized fantasies we had conjured, but in the intricacies, the messiness of our truths intertwined. This wasn't a neatly wrapped story, it was still unfolding, an exquisite blend of highs and lows living in the breath between our words. As I lay in bed that night, the echoes of our conversation lingered, a tapestry woven from threads of joy, fear, longing, and relief. No longer was I drifting off to sleep solely wrapped in thoughts of unrealized fantasies. Instead, I was cradled by the promise of an authentic journey ahead, one where nightmares didn't hold dominion over my dreams. In that acceptance, amidst the cacophony of life's beautiful chaos, I felt free. The stars outside shone brightly, as if nodding along to my revelations, and I surrendered to sleep, secure in the knowledge that every moment was a brushstroke on the canvas of my life, exactly as it was meant to be. I never imagined my life could pivot so dramatically over something as mundane as a locked door, but here I am, recounting the events of that fateful evening with a sense of incredulity that still lingers. My name is Alex, an ordinary 30-something guy with a desk job and a comfortable little home nestled in a quiet suburban neighborhood. I've always prided myself on being a conscientious husband, but like everyone else, I have my moments of negligence, and perhaps it was a combination of those moments that set this all in motion. It was a Thursday night, typical in every way, until I caught a glimpse of my wife, Laura, standing by the front door, her expression a mixture of frustration and disbelief, the kind that made my chest tighten in an instant. She was holding the doorknob, twisting it back and forth while I was half awake from a cozy couch nap, remnants of my evening routine still fresh in my mind, the warm glow of the TV, a snack bowl emptied, and the soft hum of the world outside. Laura asked me, with a sting of disappointment, if I had checked the lock after she'd gone to bed, and as I rubbed the sleep from my eyes, I realized I had utterly spaced on that detail, again. I shrugged it off at first, making casual remarks about how I trust our neighborhood and how we had lived there for years without incident. But in the back of my mind, I felt a creeping unease as I watched her react, her brow furrowed as she responded, "It's not about trusting the neighborhood, Alex. It's about being safe." A part of me wanted to laugh it away, to dismiss her concerns as overreactions like I once did during our years together, but as she continued to express her frustration, I felt a knot forming in my stomach, linking back to my own lack of accountability. Was I really that oblivious? It became clear that this situation was a metaphorical lock waiting to be clicked open, revealing deeper issues that may have long since festered beneath our shared surface. Days passed, and the conversation wafted in and out of my mind, my interactions with Laura feeling increasingly stifled like the air on a humid summer day. I'd watch her move through the house, her movement subtle yet heavy with a sense of grounded concern, the way a cloud hangs low and suspenseful, threatening rain. I noticed the little things, the way she double-checked the locks on the windows during the day, her growing habit of closing the blinds earlier than usual, her hesitance to walk to the mailbox alone. The peaceful rhythms of our life together felt interrupted as I tried to ignore the gnawing sensation at the back of my mind. The evening we normally spent side by side on the couch morphed into quiet, fragmented moments filled with awkward silences. It all came to a head one night when I returned home later than usual after meeting some friends for dinner. There she stood in the living room, awaiting my arrival like a lighthouse beacon cutting through the fog, arms crossed with a stern look on her face that I'd never seen aimed directly at me. I opened my mouth to greet her, but the words caught in my throat. I could sense it was more than just the locked door. "Did you even check the door?" Her voice was steady but tinged with a puncturing edge that stung more than I cared to admit. I hesitated, the silence stretching into a chasm. "No, I didn't," I finally admitted, the echo of those words reverberating through the room like a confession made under duress. "I just assumed you had it." It felt pathetic, my own excuse evaporating into the atmosphere. My stomach twisted again, I could see pain flickering through her eyes, an emotion beyond mere frustration, a sense of betrayal, of being let down by me, the one person she should be able to count on. Suddenly, it struck me, it wasn't just about the door, it was about trust, about dependence, about the fragile threads that held together our relationship. I realized how much she leaned on me, expected me to be her rock, and I had neglected even the simplest thread keeping our safety intact. As we sat on the couch that night, the air thick with unspoken words and fragile hopes, I squeezed her hand and spoke softly, "I'm sorry. I thought I was being rational, but I wasn't being responsible. I promised to do better, to pay attention, to make you feel safe, not just when it's convenient for me. She responded by tracing her fingers along my palm, the tension easing as the minutes passed. The silence transformed from oppressive to contemplative, and we found ourselves deep in conversation, navigating our fears, our trust, and the small yet pressing details of our shared lives. As the moonlight spilled through the window, I understood that the lock was just a symptom of a deeper issue, my unpredictability and her need for assurance. Weeks later, our routines began to shift. I made it a point to verify every lock, not just for Laura, but as a symbol of my commitment to being present and responsible. The atmosphere in our home brightened, she smiled more, and we dove into rebuilding that connective thread, one soft conversation, one warm touch at a time. Reflection filled those quiet moments. We'd sit together on the couch, and as she leaned against me, I felt a new kind of peace emerging from our shared vulnerability. And so, in the spirit of Reddit tradition and as a reflection of this journey, I find it important to add this update. The evening I thought we were heading toward a rift transformed instead into an awakening. It wasn't just about the door or even the act of locking it, it became a way to openly articulate our needs, desires, and fears. I learned that perhaps it wasn't an AITA situation at all. Perhaps, instead, it was AITA, am I trying to learn? Because in that small, seemingly trivial episode, I discovered something profound about love, trust, and the importance of the little things in creating a safe harbor we could always come home to. The door has never been left unlocked. Again, and neither have our hearts. As the weeks rolled into months following our profound conversation about the door, I found myself reflecting on the subtle transformations in our relationship. It became a game of sorts, where each night, as I prepared to settle into bed, I would gently remind Lucy to double-check the lock, teasing her playfully about my newfound security obsession. I could feel the fortress we were building, not merely around our home but within each other, grow stronger and stronger. It was surprising how such a simple act could blossom into moments filled with tenderness and laughter, a little more anticipation before sleep took us. We began establishing new rituals, little habits that weren't mandated by duty but born out of a desire to nurture our partnership. Each evening concluded with us sharing a cup of tea on the porch, watching the day melt into night, with the faint sounds of crickets filling the air, a gentle reminder that life outside continued in a rhythm we were beginning to appreciate together. I started to look at our relationship with a new lens, where open communication became our foundation, and vulnerability, once a source of anxiety, transformed into our shared strength. I cherished those confiding moments with Lucy, preparing dinner together and laughing over burnt bread, the usual small talk evolving into deeper discussions about our hopes for the future. Conversations flowed like sacred threads binding us closer, so much so that I almost forgot what it felt like to walk that thin line of misunderstanding that we had been teetering on prior. It amazed me how our vulnerabilities morphed into stepping stones, carving pathways to rediscover the intricacies of each other's souls, learning, once again, what made us who we were. There were times, of course, where we stumbled. There were disagreements around financial decisions or the occasional miscommunication that prompted a surge of frustration, but even then, instead of retreating into silent resentments, we breathed, discussed, and gently nudged each other toward a healthier understanding. I realized that those moments are just as essential as the laughter-filled ones, they rounded us out. However, the true test of this new dynamic came on a chilly autumn night. The air bit fiercely against our cheeks, and the neighbors' laughter echoed through the street, reminding me of the warmth radiating from our home. Lucy and I were cozied up on the couch, engrossed in a movie, when suddenly an urgent knocking interrupted the cozy ambience. My heart raced. Was it a stranger? A lost traveler? That familiar feeling of anxiety tugged at my chest as I glanced at Lucy, who only nodded, encouraging me to check the door. It felt as if time had slowed. I walked to the front door, the wooden floor creaking beneath my weight, feeling every heartbeat pulsing in my ears. Peering through the peephole, I was met with a young girl, maybe 10 years old, shivering and teary-eyed. I opened the door just enough to speak. "Hey there, are you all right?" Her face was lost in shadows, but I could make out the tremor of her chin and the way she rubbed her arms together, as if trying to generate warmth. I got lost. Can I call my dad? He's just around the corner." My mind spun. Here I was, in our safe bubble, our haven, facing a potential crisis. A moment of fear tangled with empathy bubbled inside me. It was a test of everything we had learned, our commitment to openness, to addressing fears head-on. "Of course, sweetie, come in," I said, opening the door wider and motioning for her to step inside. As the warmth enveloped her, she glanced back at the darkened street, her eyes wide with uncertainty. I knew that this small act could either shield her further from threats or potentially lead to something more dangerous. Lucy joined us, her nurturing presence illuminating the moment, and we quickly settled into a space of safety and comfort. I reached for my phone, handed it to the girl, and patted her on the shoulder. "Just dial the number you remember. We're right here with you." The girl's hands shook as she dialed, her voice barely a whisper as she spoke to her father. She relaxed slightly upon hearing him say he was on the way, and when she hung up the phone, her relief washed over me, filling the room with a profound quiet that seemed to hold stories of fear and safety in equal measure. When her dad finally arrived, our home transformed again, this time into a sanctuary, a temporary refuge. The girl rushed into her father's arms, and I felt an overwhelming gratitude that we were able to offer even this tiny comfort amidst her disarray. After exchanging pleasantries and ensuring she was safe, the father made it clear how invaluable our kindness was, lighting a small flame of warmth within me. After they left, as Lucy and I settled back down on the couch, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for everything in our life together. It suddenly struck me that it wasn't merely about locking the door, it was about being open to the world outside, understanding that the safety and love we built weren't just for ourselves but could spill over into interactions that mattered with everyone around us. The door, once just an entryway to our home, had morphed into a symbol of our commitment to compassion and understanding, not just for each other but for anyone who crossed our threshold. I turned to Lucy, and we exchanged a smile filled with warmth and an unspoken promise that we would always remain open, vulnerable but secure, cautious yet loving, a true masterpiece of coexistence. And in those moments of quiet reflection, surrounded by the fading light of the evening, I finally felt the weight of the world lift just a little, reminding me that love doesn't simply build walls, rather, it constructs bridges that lead us back to humanity, again and again, one gentle reminder, one locked door, at a time. As the sun dipped beneath the horizon, casting long shadows across our cozy living room, I could feel the gentle hum of evening settling in, the kind that wraps you in a cocoon of comfort. Lucy had lit a few candles, their soft glow flickering in harmony with the settling tranquility of the night. It was a small ritual we had embraced, a moment of unwinding where the chaos of the day seemed to melt away. The warmth of her presence reminded me that we had crafted a safe space together, not just through the physical act of locking the door, but through the emotional openness we had nurtured in our relationship. Pacing softly, I felt grateful for this revelation, how something as simple as a door could serve as a metaphor for our willingness to safeguard one another's vulnerabilities. "Remember that night?" Lucy asked, her voice laced with a gentle nostalgia as she curled up on the couch, her eyes sparkling with memories. "The one where we both brainstormed a list of our fears?" She chuckled lightly, and I joined in, recalling a time when our insecurities seemed larger than life. We had laughed as we shared everything from mundane anxieties about work to deeper concerns about our relationship. That honest exchange had unknowingly paved the way for our newfound understanding of what it meant to connect, truly connect, beyond surface-level conversations. "Yeah," I replied, settling in beside her and draping an arm around her shoulders. "It's amazing how vulnerability can turn into strength if we let it." The moment felt precious, the world outside blurring into insignificance as we cocooned ourselves in this intimate bubble of safety. We began to share not just our fears, but our dreams, each whisper more soothing than the last, forming a tapestry of hopes that we would nurture together. I felt a rush of contentment, realizing that each lock I checked, each door I secured, was a commitment, an act of love that transcended fear and doubt. As the bits and pieces of our evening unfolded, conversations sparked like fireworks, our discourse ranging from future vacations we dreamed about to our desire to bring a pet into our home. Lucy was still talking about getting a dog, something I had initially hesitated over, wary of the added responsibility, but the way she spoke, her eyes lighting up at the thought, began to chip away at my resistance. A dog would be more than just an addition to our lives, it would be a shared experience, a reminder of how love could flourish in the little moments, from morning walks to lazy afternoons spent on the couch. With every word exchanged, I felt the door we had just locked moments before transform into one that swung wide open, inviting in a rush of warmth. As the candles flickered gently, casting playful shadows on the walls, I could see what lay ahead of us, a future painted in shades of laughter, compassion, and unwavering support. It was empowering to realize that we weren't just locking away our fears, we were also sealing in our joys, ensuring that nothing could breach the sanctuary we were building together. In time, as the evening wore on and the moon cast a silver glow through our window, I took a moment to breathe deeply and internalize the warmth of this connection we were nurturing. The world outside felt distant, almost irrelevant, as I realized that our relationship had morphed from merely coexisting to truly living, a shared journey where each step was marked by intention and understanding. Have you ever thought about how locking the door is kind of a ritual? I mused aloud, breaking the comfortable silence that had enveloped us like a soft blanket. Lucy nodded, her dark hair catching a glimmer of candlelight. It's the first step we take in closing out the outside world, she said thoughtfully, but it also makes space for us to just be, here, in our little world. It's our way of saying, this is our time. We matter. Yes. I replied, feeling a swell of pride and love. It wasn't just about locking the door, it was about what it symbolized, the commitment to honor our space and each other. The balancing of boundaries and openness that allowed for growth without losing our individuality. I couldn't help but smile, envisioning the dog we might someday share. Next door might be the kids, or the noise of the world, but in this moment, it's just us. As the last flicker of the candles dimmed, I felt a deep reassurance envelope me, a tender acknowledgement that our bond was evolving in ways that were once unimaginable. I snuggled closer to Lucy, feeling the warmth radiating from her, a beacon in the cool night. The locked door wasn't just a safeguard, it was a promise we had made to each other, a vow to always return to the safe harbor we had created. And so, as I closed my eyes and allowed sleep to wash over me, I found solace in the laughter that echoed through the evening and the new dreams we would embrace upon waking. A door locked, yet ajar with possibility, standing as a testament to our journey. And with that, I drifted into sleep, content, loved, and forever learning. It was a crisp winter morning when my son and I arrived at the slopes, the air sharp and invigorating, promising a day filled with laughter and the thrill of gliding down glistening white hills. My son, Ethan, had only started skiing a couple of months prior but was already captivated by the sport. His enthusiasm was infectious. As a single parent, I cherished these moments spent together, feeling the weight of life melt away with each laugh as we bundled up against the cold. The excitement in his little voice as he beckoned me to a gentler slope warmed my heart. I watched him transform from a cautious beginner into a spirited skier. But as morning gave way to afternoon and we found ourselves at the base of a moderate hill, ready to take on a new challenge, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Ethan, energized by the promise of adventure, shot off ahead of me, his red helmet bobbing in the distance while I followed cautiously, knowing that he needed space to explore but also keeping a watchful eye on his technique. That's when I saw him, a man with a smug expression and a bright orange ski jacket, barreling down the hill. I initially mistook him for simply a confident skier, but I soon realized he had little regard for those around him. As if determined to prove his prowess, he sidestepped Ethan's path as they met in a tumble of limbs and sharp edges. I felt my heart drop as I watched Ethan crumple to the snowy ground, a frightened look on his face. Before I could reach him, the man clumsily skidded to a stop, his attention unfocused as he turned to check his own gear rather than caring for the child he had just collided with. I rushed over, my heart racing, and knelt beside Ethan, my hands brushing against the cold snow as I surveyed him for injuries. Thankfully, he appeared unharmed, but the tears welling up in his eyes rattled me more than any physical ailment could. Anger simmered just beneath the surface as I glanced at the man, who was now sauntering away, clearly unconcerned about the aftermath of his recklessness. "Are you okay, buddy?" I asked Ethan gently, my voice trembling with a mix of relief and rising fury at the man's arrogance. Yet the sting of humiliation mingled with my protective instincts. Was it overreacting to call ski patrol on someone who had scared my child? As I comforted Ethan, I could see he was growing more distressed by the second, overwhelmed by the sudden chaos of the moment. I took a breath and made the call. While waiting for the patrol to arrive, I watched the man laugh and joke with his friends nearby as if Ethan's experience was an amusing side note. The urge to confront him was palpable, but fear held me back, wondering if turning this into a spectacle would only upset Ethan more. The ski patrol arrived relatively quickly, assessing the situation with calm professionalism while I explained what had happened and how the man had disappeared into the background of the day, leaving a ripple of anxiety in his wake. They assured me Ethan was safe and that they would handle the matter, which left me feeling both relieved and a little uncertain about whether I had crossed a line. After they dealt with the incident, Ethan and I decided to take a break, curling up at a nearby cabin with steaming mugs of hot cocoa. As we sat there, I watched him slowly return to his bubbly self, animatedly discussing how he wanted to tackle the next slope while I mentally sifted through my choices. Had I been too harsh? Did intervening really matter? The warmth of the drink settled over me as Ethan's laughter filled the air. My heart was still heavy, but the fuller sense of parental protection began to outweigh it. When we returned to the slopes, I kept him close, monitoring every wave of excitement or fear reflected on his face. The thought could not help but linger: should I have chosen a different route? The incident haunted me, a nagging feeling not just of vigilance but of questioning my decisions, stacking against the joy of our day. That evening, while tucking Ethan into bed, I finally asked him what he thought about the day, and he smiled brightly, recounting the delicious cocoa and the fun of trying out new runs. "Did you see how I turned my skis to avoid that giant snow bump?" he asked. Relief washed over me. Perhaps in the midst of chaos, our little adventures had forged lessons that neither of us would forget. Updates floated through my mind as I reflected on the afternoon, pondering about talking to someone at the lodge about safety for the kids but largely trusting that the ski patrol had taken appropriate action. The next morning, I sat idly, scrolling through a local social media forum when I stumbled upon a post titled something like "AITA for being a reckless skier." The familiar orange jacket leapt off the screen. It was the man from the previous day, recounting the incident but portraying himself as a misunderstood thrill seeker who had been wronged. I chuckled softly and felt a wave of empowerment wash over me, reinforcing that I did the right thing for my son. The story rolled through my mind as I sipped my coffee. Life was often a toss-up of what's right or wrong, but when it involved safeguarding my child, I knew I'd take the ski patrol every time. As I sat there, watching the steam rise from my mug, my thoughts danced between the warmth of the cafe and the icy chaos of yesterday's events. The mountain air clung to me still, its crispness a sharp reminder of that too-close encounter. My son, Jason, had been so excited to hit the slopes for the first time. The anticipation was evident in his wide-eyed, bouncing energy as we strapped on our skis, the bright sun glistening off the powdery white snow. I had watched him glide cautiously at first, a little awkward but admirable in his determination. I couldn't help but grin as he cautiously maneuvered between the ever-present shadows of seasoned skiers. That grin had faded quickly when the orange-clad man hurtled down the mountain like a rogue missile, his skis gleaming with reckless intentions. There was no slowing down, no effort to avoid my son, and the moment became a blur. I remember calling out, but my voice was swallowed by the wind as Jason was knocked off his feet, landing with an audible thud, his little body tumbling into a snowdrift. The panic that washed over me was paralyzing. I rushed to my boy, my heart hammering, unwilling to look away from the damage that could have been done. Thankfully, he just had a couple of bruises that would fade, but the feeling of fear lingered long after. As ski patrol whisked the man away, their disbelief mirrored my own. He was so enthralled by the thrill of skiing that he had overlooked his responsibility to other skiers. The disbelief turned into anger when I saw him posting about the incident online, morphing the narrative to paint himself as a victim instead of the man who had charged through a family day like a bull in a china shop. It made my blood boil, that arrogant dismissal of consequence. I pondered whether I was too quick to call ski patrol, but my internal mantra of protectiveness soothed my guilt. I had acted out of fierce love for my son. That night, I spoke to Jason about the importance of safety and respect on the slopes. He nodded, his bright spirit unscathed by the day's events. "Dad, he just didn't see me. I still want to ski," he declared, determination lining his young brow. A mixture of pride and fear twisted in my chest. A kind of courage blossomed in him that I deeply admired, even if it made my heart race with worry. As days passed, I kept peeking into the online forums where the orange jacket guy had been, watching him twist words to become a skiing legend when he was just a reckless distraction. Then, something shifted, the comments began taking a turn. More skiers echoed our experience, pointing out his reckless behavior and demanding accountability. It felt comforting to know that I wasn't alone in my assessment. The twisted perspectives attempting to absolve his actions had no traction. It seemed everyone else saw it as clearly as I had. I even gathered the courage to participate, sharing how his actions had endangered my son and that safety should always trump thrill-seeking thrills. Months later, as I skimmed through the old posts, I reached one that caught my eye. AITA for apologizing to a parent after reflecting on my reckless skiing? It was the same orange jacket, though this time the tone was remorseful. The author spoke candidly about self-reflection and growth since that fateful day. I couldn't help but shake my head, the past merging awkwardly with the present. Though it was gratifying to see someone take accountability, a part of me resented the years lost to careless decisions. I closed my laptop and turned my gaze into the depth of winter as it changed to dusk. Jason was at the window, captivated by the falling snow, his laughter a bright star amidst the swirling white. Perhaps life was less about the transgressions of others and more about how we chose to love and nurture, to build characters and let them shine. The glow in my son's eyes was enough to make me forget the orange jacket and all it represented. The love I held for him ignited my understanding that we all fall, we all learn, and sometimes we must confront the slopes for the world to truly thrive. As the evening settled in and the warmth of the fireplace flickered shadows on the walls, I found a sense of calm wrap around me, interlaced with the soothing sounds of the crackling logs. I watched Jason dance around the room, his little feet gliding over the polished wood like they had learned to ski themselves, each movement a testament to unbridled joy. It was in these quiet moments, away from the chaos of the ski slopes and the bitterness of confrontation, that I found clarity. The way he playfully mimicked the ski patrol with a makeshift rescue backboard, a cushion from the couch draped over his shoulders, made me smile. My heart warmed with the thought that the incident on the slopes, while harrowing, had embedded itself in a lesson of safety and respect that I hoped would shape Jason's adventures in the years to come. With a steaming mug of cocoa in hand, I settled into the couch, letting the aroma wrap around me like a cozy blanket. My phone vibrated, and I instinctively grabbed it, half expecting another distasteful rant from the orange-jacketed antagonist. Instead, it was a notification from Reddit. Jason's antics had drawn the attention of my post, a flurry of comments that ranged from supportive to downright accusatory. I chuckled softly, reminded of how the public realm could partition experiences so neatly into heroes and villains, spectator and participator. But as I read through the comments, a sense of community enveloped me. Many echoed my thoughts, recognizing that in the world of parenting, we don't always have time for gray areas. Suddenly, my musings were interrupted by a soft knock at the door. I glanced towards Jason, who had momentarily halted his playful theatrics, curiosity gleaming in his eyes. I opened the door to find Leah, our neighbor, with her 2 kids, bundled up against the cold. "We heard you had hot cocoa," she said, grinning widely. Her laughter melded with the sounds of snowfall, brightening our home even more. The kids rushed in, their cold cheeks rosy and eyes sparkling. Jason's laughter reignited as he pulled them into his playtime adventure, and the atmosphere shifted. In the midst of our newfound gathering, I realized that life's slopes could be treacherous, but they also gave rise to moments of incredible joy and connection. I welcomed Leah and her children, brewed fresh cocoa, and chuckled as they retold their ski adventures and mishaps. Each tale unfolded as gently as the snowflakes twirling outside, a reminder of how laughter and camaraderie could soften the sharp edges of an unfortunate day. As the night progressed, we worked together to build a fort with blankets and pillows, creating a sanctuary of laughter in our living room. I could see how these interactions knitted the fabric of community and camaraderie, and I forgot the weight of the perpetrator's orange jacket as I engaged with the now familiar chaos. Every fit of giggles, every slight mischief, and even the way the kids tossed snowballs wove a thread of warmth that contrasted against the chilly world outside, reminding me that while I had stood firm on the slopes, ensuring my son's safety, my real battle was here, fostering a space free of judgment and full of love. The evening dragged on, fading into night, with stories exchanged and cocoa cups emptied. Just as I was beginning to feel drowsy, my phone buzzed again. The thread on my earlier post had exploded with notifications. I glanced at the screen with fatigue but curiosity. More stories shared, sympathies and remembrances of their own cultish orange jacket encounters, and unexpected words of encouragement. One comment, in particular, struck me: "Every time you stand up for your child, the world gets a little bit brighter." I smiled, taking a deep breath. It felt like a love letter to every parent grappling with their role in protecting their children amidst the unforgiving terrain of the world. Settled back into the couch, I closed my eyes, letting the sounds of laughter swirl around me like the snow outside, enveloping me in a cocoon of warmth. I realized that we must all navigate our slopes, but what mattered more than the falls or daring escapes was how we choose to love, nurture, and advocate for those we hold dear. That night, as Jason drifted off to sleep surrounded by remnants of his excitement, I too surrendered to the calm of the moment, feeling reassured that each step I took for him was a step towards fostering resilience and strength, something I hoped would carry him even beyond the ski slopes. When the news rolled in about the upcoming 2024 general election, I felt something shifting within me, an unfamiliar sensation bubbling up that wrestled for dominance, an unsettling mix of anxiety and detachment that I couldn't quite place. My name is Alex, a 33-year-old graphic designer living in a small town in Ohio, where politics always seemed to be the gossip just shy of being casual dinner conversation. I had always practiced my democratic right with diligence, feeling the pull to make my voice heard, but this year, as I sifted through the barrage of political ads and polarizing debates, the thought of participating began to feel like an undertaking I was no longer prepared to shoulder. My friends, a close-knit group that loved long discussions over cheap beer in dimly lit corners of our favorite pub, were animated about their plans to vote, each of them ready to champion their chosen candidate with fervor. I sat quietly, an observer in a room full of political fervor, my heart heavy with an unspoken truth. I had made the decision to abstain. In the weeks leading up to the election, I found myself grappling with the consequences of my choice, wrestling with guilt. The fear of being judged loomed over me like a dark cloud, especially when Marissa, one of my closest friends, looked me in the eye and asked point-blank why I wasn't getting involved. Her passion was palpable, a stark contrast to my silent disillusionment. I had always prided myself on being the progressive voice in our group, often debating to the wee hours about the state of the nation, but at that moment, I felt a chasm forming between who I was and who I was expected to be. As the October sky turned gray, the chatter about the election only intensified. All around me, people began sharing their reasons to be hopeful, while I remained bound within my cocoon of reluctance and ambivalence. On election day, I made my way to the polling station as if pulled by an invisible force, my heart racing with indecision. But as I stood in line, watching the excitement cascade off my neighbors, their hopeful faces illuminated by the promise of change, I couldn't help but feel that my choice had carved out a hollow space in my chest. I turned away from the polling booth. I didn't cast my vote, and the relief that washed over me felt like a strange, slippery comfort, reminding me of the countless times I had ignored what I really wanted. Days passed, turning into weeks, and I rejoined my friends, feigning enthusiasm about the election results while internally grappling with an overwhelming sense of being an outsider. But with every social gathering, the question beckoned: how would I reconcile my decision? My internal turmoil simmered, and I slipped into a routine that felt numbingly safe. Over beers one night, Marissa caught me staring off into space, her brow furrowing with concern. "Don't you care where this country is headed?" she asked, half jesting but genuinely curious. The truth was, I did care, but it was the decision-making process that had weighed on me like an anchor. I finally took a breath, confessing that while I had chosen abstention, I was scared of both the consequences and the implications of my choice, a choice that was fundamentally my own. The bar quieted, the noise of surrounding conversations faded as unexpected empathy settled among us. "You know, it still counts that you thought it through, right?" Marissa said softly. "Taking a stand is more than just voting." Those words resonated deeper than I anticipated, stirring something lost within me. A sense of relief washed over me like a warm wave, and I suddenly found clarity amid the chaos. As I walked away from the pub that night, thinking of the natural ebb and flow of democracy, I realized my decision didn't have to define me. It echoed back to the importance of understanding my values, and the courage to live with my choices, even those that differ from others. A few weeks later, I returned to the forum that sparked this exploration, drawn by a post titled "Voting Eligible Americans Who Deliberately Abstained in the 2024 General Election. How are you feeling about your decision?" My fingers hovered above the keyboard as I began to type, feeling surprisingly cathartic. "I didn't vote, and I had to confront something within myself that needed attention," I wrote, detailing my feelings of isolation, the conversations I had with friends, and the beauty of owning my narrative, free from the chains of expectation. The replies came flooding in, each comment filled with support and encouragement, a sign that I wasn't alone in my experience. As the reflections flowed, I understood that sometimes the silence was louder, and in the stillness of my decision, I found my voice, a piece of me I thought I'd lost amid the tumultuous noise of others. Even if I hadn't marched to the ballot box, I had started a new conversation within myself, a dialogue that brought me peace and a sense of reconnection with those around me. In the back of my mind, I felt the tide beginning to turn, waiting for the next election, where I would be ready, not just to vote, but to connect, to engage in the very democracy I feared for so long. And that felt, in so many ways, like a victory. The days turned into weeks, and as the leaves turned their brilliant colors of fall, I found myself in a reflective state more often than not. I could feel that familiar blend of anxiety and relief slipping away simultaneously. It astonished me how something as simple as acknowledging my own feelings about participation could liberate my mind. I had been caught in a cycle of feeling pressured to engage in a political landscape I found overwhelming. Watching the news had become akin to walking through a foggy forest, the shadows of tensions looming everywhere, but clarity eluded me. I decided it was time to share my realizations, and I did so with friends over warm coffees and cozy dinners, often nestled in our favorite cafe, the one adorned with local art and the warmth of community. It sparked conversations that felt refreshing, The kind I hadn't experienced in ages, where we discussed not only the frustrations of the political process but also our own experiences and insecurities surrounding it. Through these candid exchanges, I realized I was not alone. Others had their own hesitations, some had chosen to abstain not out of apathy but due to a lack of transparency in a system that felt rigged. It was refreshing to uncover these truths, and my heart swelled with an emerging sense of solidarity. I began to take part in community debates and local gatherings, often simply to listen, absorbing perspectives that broadened my understanding of the issues plaguing us. Each conversation, each shared laugh or sigh of frustration, chipped away at the barricade that I had built around myself over the years. You see, I was always the quiet one, the thinker who mulled over every word before they left my lips. As a child, I'd be lost in my books while the world outside thrummed with the energy of life, utterly consuming yet seemingly foreign. But now, I discovered that the threads of connection we forged could be powerful tools for change. On a chilly November night, as the first snowflakes felt like whispers on my cheeks, I found myself in a small community center, seated in a circle of open hearts and eager minds. We were there to discuss the issues we faced and how we could foster a more transparent dialogue in the political realm. I spoke, not with fear but with intent, sharing my journey of abstaining from voting. When I finished, I was met with nods and insightful questions that encouraged deeper reflections. I felt the comforting warmth of acceptance wash over me. It turned out authenticity was the key, allowing everyone to relax their guard, igniting a fire to participate. Each of us had varying experiences with the electoral process, and as we spoke, I noticed a shift. Our frustrations morphed into ideas, ideas sparked plans, and plans became action. By the time Christmas rolled around, the spirit of togetherness was palpable, and we were organizing small initiatives to educate our community about local governance, breaking down barriers that often made participation feel insurmountable. The more we spoke, the more I realized that my decision to abstain was only a moment in a larger narrative, one that now included countless voices all demanding to be heard. Amid the glow of holiday lights, I felt a profound sense of duty begin to bloom alongside my old fears. I could finally see the beauty in civic engagement. Ours was a collective journey, one shaped by our joys and our struggles. I even found myself having conversations with family, my parents included, who always assumed my quiet nature translated to passivity. They listened, surprised to hear me share my newfound passion, the convictions bubbling up like a fresh spring. We agreed the political system was far from perfect, yet we recognized together the power we wielded in our communities. As 2024 approached, rather than feeling burdened by decision fatigue, I felt empowered by possibilities. I continued to stay informed, setting aside my cynicism and instead rooting for change rooted in compassion and understanding. Each small gathering, every collective decision we made, ignited a spark in me. I felt hopeful in a way I hadn't in many years, ready to march not just into the next election but into every conversation that needed to happen, ready for any certainty and uncertainty that may unfold. And so, as I look back upon those fleeting moments, I carry not just the weight of my previous decisions but the understanding that each vote matters, and each voice, mine included, deserves to be heard loud and clear. And who knows? Perhaps when the next election rolls around, I won't just find my voice, I'll help others find theirs, as our stories intertwine in this complex tapestry of democracy that we are all learning to navigate together. As the days turned to weeks after that pivotal moment of realization, I found myself reflecting on the conversations I'd had with friends and family who, like me, had waded through their own complexities regarding the political landscape. Each gathering, whether it was over coffee in the early morning light or during lazy evenings watching the sun dip below the horizon, became a safe haven where we could peel back the layers of our doubts and fears. Collaboratively, we explored the weight of our choices, the regrets and hopes that clung to the shadows of our decisions as much as they did to the bright moments of clarity we unexpectedly stumbled upon. I remember one specific evening in early December, when a heavy snowfall blanketed the world outside, casting a quiet that settled into our hearts. We nestled together in my living room, curled up with blankets, hot chocolate warming our fingers, the soft glow of candlelight flickering in the corners. It was here that we spoke openly about the nuances of political abstention and choice, as real faces and names flashed through our minds, struggles and joys intertwined. Why didn't we just vote? My friend Sarah asked, crunching her marshmallow-laden treat between her teeth, her eyes wide and searching. I could feel the weight of her gaze. We had all pondered that question at some point, and as the air filled with warmth and a hint of vulnerability, I decided to share. Because I was scared, I finally admitted, my voice gentle yet firm, scared that whatever I chose could cause more harm than good, that my one little voice wouldn't matter in the cacophony of noise. Slowly, the others began to share. It was as if each unraveling thread brought us closer together. We each found safety in the collective breath of shared uncertainty, our voices merging into a symphony of reassurances, echoing the notion that we could all relate, a tapestry of human experience meeting at the heart of our insecurities. But now, I continued, emboldened by our exchange, I realize that even silence is a choice that echoes through the halls of democracy. I'm more determined than ever to navigate this journey, not just for me, but for everyone who feels unheard. I could see the spark resonate as it ignited within my friends, and that feeling lingered, illuminating our discussions over the following weeks. As the holiday season brought us together again and again, those conversations helped dissipate the clouds of doubt that hung over our heads, slowly transforming into beams of anticipation for what lay ahead. Each time we met, I felt more assured, more equipped to engage not just in political debates but in the human element of our experiences. We shared stories beyond the confines of voting, ones that traversed familial struggles, economic uncertainties, and the broader, aging questions about morality and justice. When January rolled in, I found myself feverishly reading about local candidates and nurturing a curiosity about issues that had once felt foreign to me. It became increasingly clear that I didn't merely want to educate myself, I yearned to empower those around me to feel that same thrill, the kind of passion that ignited a fire in our hearts. We organized small, casual meetups to discuss what mattered to us, drafting a loose plan to engage with others in our communities, and I could see the excitement ripple through our group. The days brightened, not just because spring was thawing winter's edge but because I felt the stirrings of a movement blossom among friends, neighbors, and a dawning belief that were we to come together with empathy and purpose, we could all carve out a space in this intricate system of governance that so often felt distant. It was a tangled web, yes, but one I was now eager to explore, step by step. As the chatter of the upcoming primary elections flickered on the horizon, I knew I would not be tiptoeing into my first vote alone. That commitment to re-engage came with promises layered in love for my community and the unyielding desire to be a part of something larger than myself. No longer would I hide behind the veil of silence, waiting to be swept away, for now my voice was a thread woven into the ongoing conversation, rippling outward to others waiting to share their stories too. With each heartfelt discussion, I felt more assured that we each had power, not just in the voting booth but in our stories, our connections, and the courage to face uncertainty together. And who knows? Perhaps the next time I stood in line at the polling place, I wouldn't just be looking for my own voice but ready to encourage my fellow citizens to find and raise theirs, fusing our energy in a chorus of hope, and stepping into a future we could all believe in. As I settled into bed that night, enveloped by the gentle hum of life around me, I let myself drift, comforted by the knowledge that, regardless of the election's outcome, a new chapter had begun, not just for me, but for all of us navigating this shared journey. Every Friday, as twilight began to drape its velvet shadow over my town, I found myself slipping into an abandoned version of our world, a realm I had only begun to understand. My name is Sarah, and at 32, I was navigating the messy waters of adulthood with the grace of a swan on ice. I had a job I loved as a graphic designer, a small but cozy apartment, and a close-knit group of friends who would gather over wine and laughter every weekend. Yet beneath the surface of my seemingly idyllic life simmered a strange phenomenon. Every Friday, with the onset of night, I stumbled into this alternate reality where everything felt both eerily familiar and paradoxically different. It started innocuously enough, just the usual urge to take a solitary walk to clear my mind after a hectic week. One evening, I meandered through the park, where the scent of damp earth filled the air and streetlights flickered like stars awakening, when I felt a sudden chill dance along my spine. That was the moment everything changed, as I found myself staring down an alleyway I had never noticed before. The air grew thick and heavy as I stepped inside, and what unfolded felt like a scene from a long-forgotten dream. It was a fractured mirror of our world, skyscrapers leaned unnaturally, their windows shattered, and the streets were littered with remnants of a bustling life that once thrived. The silence was almost deafening, punctuated only by a soft whisper of wind that seemed to carry the echoes of laughter and conversations long lost. Each week, I wandered deeper, meeting shadows that mirrored my own life, shapes of people I recognized but were stuck in time. There was Jason, my ex-boyfriend, sitting forlornly on a park bench with an unreadable expression, and my childhood friend Lily, trapped in a loop of tying her shoelaces, eyes glazed and unseeing. It was agonizingly beautiful and heartbreakingly tragic all at once. Even though a part of me wanted to shake them awake, to remind them they were part of a world that moved forward, I felt an inexplicable bond with them, a sense of shared longing for what had been lost. Every encounter brought more questions than answers, and a knot of guilt lodged itself in my chest. Was I abandoning these versions of my friends? I found comfort in the stillness they provided, a stark contrast to the chaos of life outside this broken reality, yet it was a bittersweet solace. The emotions tangled within me, weaving a fabric of unresolved feelings I had yet to confront. Driven by a mix of curiosity and a need for closure, I questioned my own reality. Was I merely a spectator in this parallel existence, or had I become an unwilling participant in the decay of what used to be? After weeks of wandering, something extraordinary happened. One Friday, as the sun dipped below the horizon, swallowing the remnants of daylight, I found myself holding the hand of past Sarah, a version of me caught in a moment of vulnerability, crying over the remnants of lost dreams. In that moment, I realized she wasn't merely a reflection, she was a part of me, and her pain was my pain, an echo of my fears and regrets. I squeezed her hand tight, and a warmth surged between us, an understanding that we were allowed to feel all of it, the joy, the sorrow, the unfinished stories. I took a breath, exhaling the weight of expectations, and whispered promises of resilience, coaxing her to step into the light of possibility. When the dawn broke, pulling me back to my own world, I carried that moment with me. I understood now what this strange journey had been about. It wasn't just about fleeing into shadows but confronting what lay within. The following Fridays came and went, and with them, I chose to embrace both the hazy memories and the bright future waiting for me. I sought therapy, started journaling again, and reached out to the people I had neglected, rebuilding those connections with renewed vigor and honesty. In reflection, every weekend became an opportunity to grow, to heal, and to evolve. I never saw that abandoned world again, but perhaps it existed in the whispers of my mind, urging me to confront the echoes I had long kept at bay. It was strange but liberating. There was no need to return to a world that was never mine to mend. Life persisted, with its beautiful messiness, and I was ready to embrace it all anew. Update: a few months later, after harnessing my newfound sense of hope and strength, I invited my friends over for a gathering. I shared my experiences with them, how fear and joy intertwined in our lives, how we each carried shadows of past selves within us. To my surprise, they opened up too, revealing their struggles, the dreams that slipped away, the relationships that faded. We laughed and cried together, transforming what could have been an ordinary evening into something profoundly beautiful. In that moment, I realized that while my journeys into the abandoned world were over, the true exploration of life had only just begun. The warmth of our shared stories lingered in the air long after my friends left that evening, their laughter echoing in the silent corners of my home like a comforting blanket. I sat among the remnants of our gathering, the empty glasses, the discarded pizza boxes, the faint smell of burnt candle wax, and let the realization of our newfound connection wash over me. It struck me how easy it was to get lost in the grind of everyday life, focusing on the mundane tasks and brushing aside our emotional landscapes as if they were clutter. But that night, we had revealed our vulnerabilities. We peeled back the layers we wore for the world, showing glimpses of the pain and passion that simmered beneath. It was a cathartic release for all of us, a pact to keep our hearts open, no matter how scarred they may have been. As the days went by, I found myself seeking the presence of my friends more often, each gathering becoming a ritual of sorts, small fires of connection. Against the chill of life's uncertainties. We shared coffee before work, late-night walks under stars that appeared more vivid than ever, and even those awkward moments of silence that spoke volumes about our growing trust. The abandoned world where I once escaped felt increasingly distant, a fading echo of solitude in contrast to the vibrant tapestry we were weaving together. Yet, sometimes, an unfamiliar shadow would brush against my thoughts, a faint reminder of the solitude I once found comforting. One Friday night, as I prepared for another gathering, the air thick with anticipation, I glanced out of my window and spotted a figure in the distance. An overwhelming sense of déjà vu washed over me. I recognized the silhouette from my previous encounters within that parallel realm. It stood still amidst the swirling wind, a tangible piece of my past resurrected in the real world, its presence unsettling yet oddly magnetic. My heart began to race with a mixture of fear and disquiet. Had my journeys truly ended, or did the abandoned world still seep into my reality? I pushed the thought aside and joined my friends, our conversations flowing like an unbroken river, laughter bubbling through the thick evening air, but the figure lurked in the corner of my mind, demanding attention. It became an unwelcome guest at our feast, lingering there, causing my smile to falter and my laughter to sound hollow at times. As the night carried on and my friends' stories unfurled, I fought to focus, yet every time I glanced outside, there it was, steadfast and unyielding. That following night, sleep evaded me like a wary wild animal, and I found myself staring out into the dark. Something compelled me, an insatiable thirst to confront whatever ghost of my past was anchored in the shadows. I slipped out of my house, leaving behind the warmth of camaraderie, unsettling excitement coursing through me. As I approached the figure, I felt a magnetic pull drawing me closer, despite the nagging fear that crept into my thoughts. The urgency to uncover the truth wrapped around me like a scarf on a cold winter night. When I finally stood before it, the figure morphed into an ethereal version of myself, an echo from the abandoned world, draped in garments that seemed woven from air and despair. "You left me behind," it whispered, the voice unfamiliar yet intimately familiar, echoing the unresolved parts of my spirit. The words dug deep, but instead of fear, a wave of recognition washed over me. "I didn't leave you, I transformed," I replied, my voice steady despite the shivering uncertainty in my heart. We stood there, two halves of the same story, the weight of everything unspoken suspended in the air like a thick fog. "You can't run from what you've been," the phantom self cautioned, "but you can accept it." The truth nestled within me at that moment. No longer was I that figure trapped in desolation. I understood now that both aspects of myself were valid, not separate but interconnected, each yearning for recognition and acceptance. With a newfound resolve, I stepped forward, embracing the other me, feeling the cold slip away and warmth fill the air between us. "I understand you," I murmured, "and I won't forget you." It had all led to this nexus, this moment of convergence of past and present. The figure shimmered before me and gradually began to dissolve like mist at dawn. In that transformative moment, I realized that our struggles didn't define us but rather enriched our existence. They interwove into the fabric of who we were and who we were becoming. When I returned home, I sensed a profound stillness around me. I slid back into bed, cradled by the quiet, the echoes of our gathering still mingling with my thoughts, now clearer and brighter. Each relationship, each struggle, each laugh shared had not just been an escape from the abandoned world but a pilgrimage toward wholeness and acceptance. As I drifted off to sleep, I understood that my journey had only just begun, the threads of connection promising the warmth of love, hope, and understanding in a world both expansive and beautifully intimate. Update: a week later, I received an unexpected message from one of my friends, who revealed that after our last gathering, they had decided to pursue a passion they had long abandoned. Through our conversations, they realized how much they had been missing out on by burying their dreams. They were taking steps to reclaim their life, inspired by that evening's vulnerability. I felt an overwhelming tide of gratitude, knowing that the parallels of our lives would continue to entwine in unexpected ways, far beyond what I had initially imagined. Each Friday now carried a promise, a chance to expand our worlds together, simultaneously exploring the depths of our pasts while forging paths into a brighter future. As the weeks passed, our Friday gatherings became something I eagerly awaited, a soft beacon amid the tumult of everyday life. Each meeting transformed into a safe harbor where we could shed our masks, nurturing a bond that felt both fragile and resilient at the same time. We shared stories of progress and setbacks, each tale echoing with laughter or laced with the bittersweet recognition of our past regrets. I watched my friends dive headfirst into their passions. Clara picked up painting again, her once dormant creativity swirling back to life in vibrant hues, while Jake, a former musician, dusted off his guitar, the strings quivering in anticipation as he strummed melodies that had long been silenced. On one damp Friday evening, as a gentle rain tapped on the windows, we gathered in my living room, sipping tea and wrapped in the warmth of our camaraderie. The air was thick with shared ambitions and relentless hopes, and as the rain pattered softly against the glass, Clara stood up, her hands shaking slightly as she held a newly completed painting. I painted this for all of you," she announced, her voice vulnerable yet steady. We turned our attention, and I felt breathless as the canvas came into view, alive with swirling colors that seemed to dance in harmony. In the center of the piece stood a radiant sun, the golden rays extending outward, touching smaller images woven into the fabric of the painting, notes from a musical score, vibrant flowers in an untamed garden, and silhouetted figures embracing beneath the sky. Each element echoed our shared stories, bringing the impossible together in a dazzling display of possibility. My heart swelled as Clara shared the inspiration behind her painting, revealing it to be a tribute to our newfound resolve, a reminder that life, much like her art, was a blend of light and shadow. Each story, each contribution, tied into the greater tapestry of who we were becoming, a poignant reflection of our intertwined journey. But underneath the laughter and paint, there lurked an unspoken undercurrent. I could feel it creeping into our gatherings like the fog that sometimes settled in the valley, a lingering fear that perhaps this sense of rebirth was all too fragile, that the momentum we'd built might slip through our fingers like grains of sand. So, that night, as we wrapped up our discussions and prepared to bid each other farewell amid hugs and promises to return, I decided to let my anxious thoughts spill out. What if this all goes away? I asked, the weight of apprehension evident in my voice. What if we lose this spark? Silence enveloped the room, a collective breath held tight, until Jake broke it, his expression earnest. But what if we don't? What if we just make it a part of our lives, weave it into everything we do? It's worth the risk, isn't it? His words resonated within me, filling the space with an understanding that while the fear of change was a valid one, the courage to embrace it was something we all shared now. Our paths would not always be straight, and we would face obstacles ahead, but we had each other, the threads of our stories now woven together in ways that felt indelible. In the weeks that followed, we established a routine, a cycle of inspiration that pushed us beyond mere discussion. Clara organized a mini art show displaying her work inspired by our gatherings, and Jake penned lyrics for a song that captured the emotional essence of our shared journey. I struggled, too, dipping my toes into writing for the first time, words spilling onto the page as I explored the shadows I once thought were too dark to face. We became a collective of dreams, a sounding board for support, where failure became a learning tool rather than a conclusion. Yet, each Friday, there was still the nagging thought in the back of my mind, would this last? What would happen when life interjected and we found ourselves distanced again? One night, amid songs and artwork, Clara shared something that shook the very core of my worry. She reminded us that our relationships, those threads that connected us, might stretch, but they would never break. The vulnerability we had forged would allow our paths to remain intertwined, even during hard times. I pondered her words deeply as the weeks rolled by, the thoughts spinning like a top in my mind as I observed the changes in all of us. While life wasn't linear, perhaps the connections we built could guide us through its winding paths. Then, one crisp evening, as the trees outside began to shed their leaves in a vivid mosaic of color, so too did we shed our old selves, admitting the depth of our fears and joys. With every shared meal, every laugh, and the tears that sometimes fell freely, we started to understand that vulnerability was not a weakness but a wellspring of strength. By trusting each other with our truths, we created an unassailable support network, each of us vowing to cling tightly to the hope that had begun to unfurl within. As autumn painted our town in shades of rust and gold, I no longer feared that the world we had built would crumble. Instead, I welcomed it with an open heart, understanding that the beauty of our bond lay not just in what we shared, but in the promise of becoming, of growing and changing together. As I looked around our circle, illuminated by the warm glow of soft candlelight, I felt a calmness settle over me. The Fridays were no longer a way to escape into the past, they had grown into a celebration of our present and the radiant future we were all learning to embrace. And as I let out a soft breath, the words of our lives merging into one symphony of resilience echoed in my mind. This was only the beginning. Update, as a final note, I want to share something unexpected that emerged as we continued this journey together. Jake approached me last Friday, excitement shimmering in his eyes, and revealed that he had been writing pieces not just for himself, but for a new collaboration. He mentioned that he was planning to form a band, pulling Clara and me into the mix. The idea of sharing our stories through music and art on an even larger stage frightened me, but looking at the smiles of Clara and Jake ignited something within me, a spark of possibility. So here we are, a week later. I've agreed to join them, taking on the challenge of writing lyrics alongside Jake. The fear remains, but now, more than ever, I recognize the importance of stepping out of my comfort zone. I am ready to explore life's mysteries, both on that canvas and in those melodies. I breathe a little deeper as I consider what lies ahead, whatever it may be. I know it will be an adventure worth sharing, as we continue to shape our own beautiful, abandoned world together. It's funny how a seemingly small, mundane moment can spiral into something significant in your life. I never thought tossing out a pillow would lead me to question the very fabric of my marriage. My name is Ethan, and I've been happily married to my wife, Lily, for nearly 6 years. We have those comfortable, cozy routines, the shared cups of coffee on a Sunday morning, evening walks after dinner, and the predictable rhythm of our lives together. But lately, there was something about our shared space that had begun to grate on my nerves, particularly one fluffy, lavender-colored pillow that we kept on our bed, a gift from her grandmother. I should probably mention that it was one of those pillows that carried a constant, overwhelming scent of lavender, almost sickening at times, masking the sense of my own comforting cologne that lingered in the air. At first, it was just a quirky part of our home, but over the months, its presence turned from soothing to suffocating, especially as we prepared for a week-long family stay. I could feel my irritation bubbling beneath the surface whenever I caught sight of it. It was always there, like a persistent itch I couldn't scratch. The night before her family was set to arrive, I found myself tossing and turning, the pillow scent invading my dreams, wrapping me like a shroud. At 2 a.m, exhausted and desperate, I finally snapped. I can still vividly recall the sensation of the pillow softening in my grip as I carried it down the hallway, heart racing, my mind flooded with conflicting emotions. I felt both reckless and relieved as I swung open the door to the storage room, a small space filled with boxes and old mementos, and pitched the pillow in. It sank into the darkness like a weight off my shoulders, and I felt a jolt of sick satisfaction. I spent the next few hours in a haze of guilt and triumph, thinking about everything else I could say about our relationship, but instead, her family arrived the next morning, and Lily hadn't even noticed her pillow was gone in the chaos of greeting them. But here's where things get tricky. As the day went on, I could see the tiniest hints of concern flickering in her expression. She searched our bedroom, rifling through drawers and shrugging off the chatter of her family, who were blissfully unaware of the mounting tension. I felt that gnawing sense of unease, the kind that creeps into the bathroom mirror when you stand alone, staring at your reflection, questioning your most recent choices. When she finally confronted me, not long after dinner, her eyes were wide, searching for reassurance in my expression. "Have you seen my lavender pillow?" The question, innocent yet loaded, hung in the air between us. I hesitated but ultimately confessed, feeling the flush of shame creeping up my neck. Her silence was deafening, the confusion morphing into something sharper. Instead of comfort, I had thrown away a part of her history, a small piece of her family. And I could see the quiet devastation etched in the lines of her face. Our subsequent conversation was heavy with emotion. I could sense the spiral of hurt in her voice, revealing how that pillow had connected her to memories of her childhood, evenings spent reading on her bed, and the warmth of her grandmother's embrace. My heart sank deeper with each story she shared, a gentle reminder that sometimes love can be tangled within the tiniest details of our lives. I apologized repeatedly, feeling utterly foolish for treating her cherished memory so carelessly. We stayed up late that night, navigating through laughter and tears, acknowledging the fragility of our emotions. I never imagined that a pillow could spark such vulnerability, forcing us to confront things we often take for granted. After we reached an understanding, we decided together to continue looking for that pillow, even if it meant rummaging through the heap of nostalgia and dust lurking in that storied room. The tension eased slowly, like steam from a boiling kettle, and I found peace in the act of searching for it together. It was a journey that brought us closer, reaffirming our commitment despite the initial bump in the road. Eventually, we unearthed the pillow, still rich with its lavender scent and the remnants of a once frayed. We laughed as I improvised a half-hearted excuse about its coziness and discarded it into another box, recognizing its significance but opting for a new beginning instead. In the weeks that followed, I realized that sometimes, it's the little things that matter most and remind us we're a part of something larger. Our relationships are built on layers of memories, some heavy and some light, but all woven together in unexpected ways. And even now, whenever that scent wafts through the room, it's a reminder not just of a pillow or a memory, but how heartfelt confrontation and vulnerability can mend things we didn't even realize were breaking. Update: a few months later, I stumbled upon a similar lavender pillow during a visit to a local store, and it stirred something unexpected inside me. With a gentle hesitation, I decided to buy it and, upon presenting it to Lily with a hesitant smile, I felt the warmth return to our bedroom. She took one look at it and burst into laughter, realizing the full circle nature of our pillow saga. The new lavender pillow graced our bed, not merely as an item of comfort but as a reminder of our journey, and now, whenever I catch a whiff of it in the air, I smile at how such a simple object can hold the weight of love and understanding. As the days progressed, the lavender pillow became more than just a comfort item. It seemed to weave itself into the fabric of our daily lives, an unspoken vow that we had made to each other to communicate openly and to embrace quirks, whether they be mine or Lily's. I found myself taking more time to appreciate the little moments we shared. Each evening, as we slid into bed, I noticed how the soft texture of the new pillow cradled our heads just right, its soothing scent enveloping us both in an atmosphere that fostered intimacy and warmth. One night, I turned to Lily, illuminated by the soft glow of our bedside lamp, and found her lost in thought, her fingers gently tracing the new pillow's edge. It seemed as if she was contemplating the journey we had just traversed. I asked her what was on her mind, and after a moment's pause, she admitted that she had been reflecting on how our pillow saga had inadvertently highlighted deeper truths about our relationship, how our unique little battles often revealed the ways we could grow together. She smiled then, that beautiful, sincere smile that lit up her eyes, and I felt a wave of fondness wash over me. We began to share stories from our past, laughing at the silly, stubborn moments we'd both experienced in our previous relationships, even during awkward shopping trips where preferences clashed like magnets with different polarities. Each anecdote drew us closer. I was reminded of how important it is to embrace and accept those differences, rather than let them fester into something that could harm the bond we nurtured. Days turned into weeks, and soon the pillow became a staple in our routine. It was a silent witness to our late-night conversations, whispered secrets, and gentle arguments over whose turn it was to choose a movie. We found harmony not only in our togetherness, but also in the acceptance of our divergences. The lavender aroma became a soothing constant in our home, an aromatic thread that knitted us closer every day. Yet, like all relationships navigating their intricate paths, we did stumble upon a moment of disquietude. One stormy evening, I returned home to find the light from our kitchen casting a warm glow through the window, a familiar sight that usually warmed my heart, yet on this particular night, something felt off. As I stepped inside, I noticed the electric tension in the air. Lily was seated at the kitchen table, her gaze fixed on the window, and I could see her shoulders slightly tense as I approached. Her silence spoke volumes. She seemed deep in thought, but frustration simmered just beneath the surface. I sat down across from her, the storm outside mirroring the brewing conflict between us. "What's wrong?" I asked gently, as I reached across to touch her hand. She pulled her fingers away, an act that stung unexpectedly, making my heart race with anxiety. "It's just. Sometimes, I feel like you still don't really get it, you know?" Her words hung heavily in the air. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach, unsure of how to respond, but I pressed on. We spent hours unraveling our feelings, with the lavender pillow silently softening the edges of our tumultuous discussion. It was during that exchange that I realized how vital it was to keep the channels of communication open. My fear of conflict had often led me to be passive, while Lily's sensitivity to every little slight sometimes made her seem unyielding. Together we acknowledged the growing pains that had followed us from relationship to relationship. I wanted to assure her that I was committed to understanding her emotions, but my own insecurities struggled to surface amidst the haze of tension. We finally stood on a precipice. Either side could lead to deeper understanding or further resentment. After a long, watchful silence, I finally pulled the lavender pillow close to me and smiled weakly. "Maybe this pillow has more lessons for us than we thought," I said, chuckling softly, trying to diffuse the tension. Lily snorted in response, breaking the heaviness that had wrapped around us like a fog. As the laughter bubbled between us, we recognized the absurdity of letting such small misunderstandings amplify into something bigger. Our hearts lightened, and the glow in the room shifted. We promised to keep talking, to share our feelings no matter how uncomfortable they felt. With that, we drew together, the lavender pillow positioned as a bridge rather than a barrier. It was at that moment, nestled together in shared vulnerability, that the pillow gained yet another layer of meaning, not just a symbol of comfort, but a reminder of the importance of facing conflict together, wrapped up in love and understanding. There was something powerful in that concession. I couldn't help but feel grateful for the lessons still ahead of us, knowing that through it all, our lavender pillow would remain steadfast, soaking up the experiences of both laughter and tears, ever present on our journey together, guiding us toward deeper connection. As the days turned into weeks, the lavender pillow transformed from a mere item on our bed into an emblem of our evolving relationship. Each time I settled down at night beside Lily, I could feel the softness of that pillow cradling not just our heads, but our unspoken hopes and vulnerabilities. There were evenings when we discussed everything from work frustrations to dreams for the future, our heads resting upon it as if it were a shared confidant. It seemed like that pillow had the unique ability to diffuse tension, allowing us to speak openly, something we hadn't always done in the past. One particularly cool autumn night, when the leaves outside were swirling in the brisk wind, I decided to surprise her with a small picnic in our living room, laying out a blanket and preparing some of her favorite snacks. The casual atmosphere, punctuated with laughter, created a backdrop that felt almost magical. That evening, we talked more deeply than I had anticipated, delving into the very reasons behind our arguments, our dreams, and what we actually wanted for ourselves as individuals, and for our life together as a couple. It felt liberating, to be so open, and I found myself reflecting on the pillow's role as a catalyst for our newfound honesty. I shared my worries about our future, the concerns that gnawed at me daily, fears of stagnation, and unmet expectations, while she confessed her own feelings of inadequacy, the sometimes suffocating anxiety of living up to the ideal of being the perfect partner. We both laughed at our shared insecurities, realizing that the very things we thought made us incompatible were often the realities we both faced. As the sun dipped below the horizon, our conversation transitioned to lighter topics, such as that ridiculous pillow fight we'd had the week prior and her silly matriarchal instinct that had propelled her to guard her beloved cushions. I could see the glow of affection in her eyes as she recounted the moment she had chased me around the room, the carefree laughter reverberating off the walls, the moments I realized how resilient laughter can be in the face of even the toughest arguments. However, the deeper truth was that we were still learning, still navigating each other's intricate emotional landscapes with tender care. And it wasn't just about us. It became apparent that resolving our conflicts was essential for creating a safe space where our relationship could thrive. A few months later, as winter descended and we bundled up against the chilly winds, I felt a renewed sense of connection building between us. We'd found an equilibrium, largely thanks to that humble lavender pillow, which kept us reminded that love is not just about the easy moments. We often refer back to the day I had tossed the old one, laughing that it was the catalyst for change, a moment that pushed us to confront rather than sweep aside our frustrations. Eventually, the time came to celebrate our anniversary, and I wanted it to be special, a reflection of the journey we had embarked upon together. Little did I know that this night would not only mark our love but also balm old wounds. Preparing an intimate dinner at home, I set the table with the dishes we had shared on our very first date, recreating that familiar sense of nostalgia. After dinner, I surprised her with small gifts that told our story, simple, meaningful tokens that played into our shared history, the book she'd recommended that had remained unread on my shelf, a photograph of us taken on a rainy day when we had huddled under a single umbrella, and of course, another lavender pillow, this one softer than the last. As she unwrapped her final gift, the laughter bubbled up, and in that moment, it was evident that we'd not only survived our challenges but had also learned how to love more authentically. Because it wasn't about the gifts, or the pillows, it was about the memories behind them, the discoveries we had made about who we were, and the promise of learning more together. As I looked into her sparkling eyes, I realized that every pillow, every struggle, every moment was infused with the essence of us, reminders that, just like the lavender, our love could flourish in all seasons, rooted in respect, empathy, and a pinch of humor. It was comforting. It was ours. And I felt utterly ready for whatever the future would bring, knowing that a pillow wouldn't just rest on our bed, but would always be there to soften our disagreements and cradle our dreams together. When I received the news that my older sister, Claire, had to move back in with our parents, something deep inside me told me that my life was about to change in ways I couldn't fathom at the moment. I'm Emma, the youngest of three, and my relationship with Claire has always been a rocky one. Sure, we had shared laughter and tears growing up, but there was something about her larger-than-life persona that often overshadowed my quieter, more reserved disposition. I had built a life for myself, a snug little apartment in the heart of the city with a decent job that allowed me to pay my bills while still enjoying a few luxuries here and there. So when my parents called with concern edging their voices, explaining that Claire had been laid off and needed a place to stay temporarily, I felt a familiar tightness in my chest. They explained how Claire would contribute financially to the household, which seemed reasonable on the surface, but as the weeks passed, it became disappointingly clear that this was not going to be a temporary arrangement. The first indication of the shift came one afternoon when I casually visited my parents. Walking through the familiar doorway, I was immediately engulfed in a whirl of mismatched furniture and the uniquely cluttered chaos of their living room. It felt different now. Claire had rearranged the space, filling it with scattered boxes, remnants of her previous life. She greeted me with the same beaming smile, but I could sense an underlying tension, a whisper of irritation hanging in the air like an uninvited guest. We exchanged pleasantries that felt stilted and awkward, and it quickly became apparent that her presence was overshadowing mine. It didn't take long for her to bring up the topic of finances, how my parents were struggling to keep up with their mortgage payments while trying to help her get back on her feet. It was a tough conversation that had me feeling cornered, like they expected me to take action. I found myself drowning in guilt, torn between helping my family and maintaining my own sense of independence. They mentioned how my contribution to the mortgage would ease their burdens and allow Claire more time to get a new job, framing it as a family obligation that I simply couldn't escape. After all, right? Family sticks together. The idea of throwing money their way felt like a no-brainer, but I couldn't help but wonder if Claire would truly be grateful or if she would instead see it as another opportunity to lean on me while I struggled to maintain my budding career. I mulled over it for days, and with each passing moment, the thought of participating in this financial strain more than I had anticipated grew heavier. It wasn't just my money at stake, it was my mental space, my comfort, and my sense of security that was being tested. As the weeks turned to months, the stress festered. A particularly low evening found me swirling through the darkness of my mind, battling with the anxiety of homeownership versus my sense of familial duty. Claire continued to thrive in the chaotic comfort of our parents' home, her laughter echoing through the walls while I sat alone in my dimly lit apartment, feeling the distance grow. I pondered my worth in our family dynamic and felt torn between my urge to support them and my instinct to protect my own growing future. When confrontation finally loomed, it exploded into one dramatic night over a family dinner where we sat across the table, Claire alight with engaging stories from her day while I quietly picked at the cold pasta on my plate. In a moment of frustration, I voiced my feelings about not wanting to pay the mortgage. The air turned electric, and for the first time, Claire's mask slipped slightly, revealing a flicker of genuine indignation. "It's not just my responsibility," I asserted, a shaky confidence underlined by the crack in my voice. She was taken aback, and for a moment, I wondered if I had finally clarified my stance, but instead, all hell broke loose. I witnessed an explosion of accusations hurled between Claire and me, sharp words clattering like glass breaking. My parents, caught in the crossfire, tried to mediate, but I felt less like a daughter and more like a burden. Heat rose in my chest as Claire accused me of selfishness, while I voiced my feelings of unappreciation and betrayal. It was a raw, painful argument, and when it finally fizzled out, I couldn't shake off the suffocating realization that I wasn't sure if I could ever go back to the way things were, or if I wanted to. I excused myself that night, feeling more isolated than ever, and upon returning to my apartment, I fell into a deep, restless sleep, punctuated with dreams of family betrayals and financial obligations that loomed over me like dark clouds. Days blended into weeks until I finally decided to distance myself from the toxic cycle of guilt and anger. I started to think critically about my own wants and needs. I drafted a letter to my parents, outlining my decision not to contribute to the mortgage, hoping it would provide clarity for all of us. It was written with a tense love, filled with the emotional depth of someone who desperately wanted to reconnect but felt trapped by the dynamic set years ago. I explained that I loved them all dearly, but I could no longer sacrifice my own stability for their peace. The letters found their way to my parents, and although the response wasn't immediately warm, my parents at least acknowledged my courage to stand my ground. Claire, however, took it harder than I expected. Her phone call that followed was rife with anger and misunderstanding, yet I felt something shift. Instead of clashing, I allowed her to express herself while I calmly responded, and to my surprise, her tone softened. Weeks turned to months. Though our relationship didn't magically mend, it did begin to evolve towards something more honest. Claire ultimately found a new job that stabilized her income, and while it took time, we began to rebuild the bridge our family needed. I learned that sometimes, a stand for myself did not stem from selfishness but from a place of deep self-respect. That unanticipated reflection taught me the art of balance, how love can coexist with boundaries. And while the discussion of finances still hung in the air like a specter, our family unit began to resonate with a different tone, a more supportive, understanding one. I shared this story with a friend as we laughed about the ridiculousness of our familial dynamics. And the strangest thing happened. Claire popped into my thoughts, reminding me that, sometimes, the way you navigate conflict can redefine relationships, even if it feels contentious at first. As I lay in bed that night, the shadows of previous conflicts melted into the hush of my room, and I reveled in the soft glow of acceptance I felt. Maybe, in facing the storm together, we had each become stronger, more resilient. I would continue to carve my own path and embrace the complexity of love with boundaries, wrapped in the possibility of new beginnings and stronger ties. So, was I the asshole? Maybe, for a moment, but that moment helped safeguard my heart and nurture a family connection that was worth every ounce of struggle. As days turned into weeks, the dynamics at home shifted like the ebb and flow of the ocean tides, and I could feel the undertow of change swirling around me. My sister's presence had transformed the atmosphere. The house was no longer just a shell echoing with silent resentments and unspoken words but was now filled with laughter, late-night conversations, and the occasional argument over whose turn it was to take out the trash. I caught myself glancing at her when I thought she wasn't watching, noticing the way she'd laugh at her own silly jokes or how her eyes would shimmer when she spoke about her work. I felt a flicker of warmth, the kind I hadn't allowed myself to embrace in years. I wondered if this was the unfamiliar sound of healing, an orchestra assembling after decades of discordant notes, each of us tentatively racing our instruments to join the symphony. Yet, beneath this newly woven tapestry lay a knot of tension that refused to loosen. The impending reality of our parents' financial situation loomed over us like dark clouds on the horizon. They had worked tirelessly to keep a roof over our heads, sacrificing much for a sense of security that now seemed delicate. I couldn't shake off the guilt swirling in my gut, an insistent reminder that my own independence had inadvertently contributed to the distance growing between my family and our responsibilities. We were all learning to navigate these choppy waters together, bound by a shared sense of duty, but the question echoed in my mind, was I responsible for saving us from drowning? One crisp autumn evening, as the sun began to dip below the trees, painting the sky in rich oranges and purples, I took a walk to gather my thoughts. I needed clarity. I found myself wandering to the coffee shop down the street, a cozy little place filled with the aroma of freshly brewed beans and the soft hum of conversations that somehow made my worries feel lighter. As I sipped my cappuccino, I overheard a couple discussing their struggles with family dynamics, and it struck me how universal our experiences were. That was when I realized I wasn't alone, that this shared pain, this negotiation of love and obligation, resonated beyond the walls of our family. When I returned home, a darkness was hanging in the air. My parents had decided to have the talk about their mortgage again. As they gathered us around the dining room table, I could see the worry etched into their faces, lines deepening like cracks in a porcelain vase, beautiful but fragile. They explained how the financial burden had grown heavier since my sister had moved in, how they had hoped the extra help would ease their situation, but instead it felt like an anchor dragging us all down. I could feel my heart racing, the old defenses rising up like walls starting to thicken around me again. I didn't want to fight, I wanted to connect, but the words seemed to stick in my throat. Finally, I spoke up, my voice steady but soft. What if we came together to plan this out? I want to help. The room fell silent, each of us in our thoughts, the tension a thick, almost tangible fog. My sister's eyes lit up, and for a moment, the lightness from the coffee shop danced back into the room. We frantically brainstormed ideas, pooling resources like a patchwork quilt, slowly stitching together something new. It was in that moment that I felt a compelling shift, a sturdy thread, woven through the fabric of our relationships, an undeniable connection that reminded us we were all part of the same tapestry. As the weeks passed, we fine-tuned our household budget, and while some days were harder than others, we managed to claw back the control that had slipped from our fingers. The burden didn't evaporate, but sharing it made it bearable. The night before my parents were set to meet with their mortgage lender, I found myself curled up with my sister on the couch, a bowl of popcorn between us while we binge-watched our favorite show. The laughter flowed between us, and for the first time in so long, I felt free, unconfined by our past but tethered to something new and beautiful. When morning came, as the birds chirped their daily greetings, I caught an early glimpse of my parents, standing tall against the dawn, ready to face the day. They seemed more resolute, the worry less visible as they exchanged quiet words. I knew we had moved past the point of being the assholes. We hadn't just weathered the storm, we had learned to dance in the rain, to let the drops wash away our fears, and we emerged, messy, imperfect, but undeniably united. Looking back, I realized that my initial reluctance to pay the mortgage had stemmed from a place of self-preservation and misunderstanding, but it quietly evolved into an opportunity for growth. In acknowledging my boundaries, I learned the importance of balance and the strength of family, and that love isn't just about sacrifice, it's about sharing, supporting, and ultimately embracing the complex layers that knit us together. So, was I the asshole? Not anymore. Just a person learning to navigate the beautiful chaos of family ties, tangled yet stronger for the journey we shared. As for an update, life continues to unfold in unexpected ways. A couple of months later, my parents expressed their gratitude, our collective efforts had eased their burden, and they even started discussing investments in their favorite hobbies again. My sister and I grew closer, sharing our lives, guiding one another, and at times, still butting heads. Yet, each argument only served as an avenue for growth, a chapter added to our story. I think, in the quiet moments of reflection, that's the beauty of family. It's messy, sometimes frustrating, but amidst all that chaos, we often find our way back to each other. And really, isn't that what matters most? As I settled into this new rhythm of life, I noticed how the air felt different in our home. It was lighter, infused with the sense of camaraderie that had blossomed between my sister and me. On weekends, our kitchen filled with the sense of baking bread and simmering sauces, an orchestra of sound as we attempted new recipes together. But it wasn't all flour and laughter, the undercurrents of tension could still surface. I remember one particularly rainy Saturday afternoon when the sky mirrored our mood. I had returned home after a long week of work, exhausted and craving solitude. Instead, I found my sister hosting an impromptu gathering of her friends. The din of youthful laughter and music pulsed through the house, and I felt my heart thrum uneasily in my chest. I was torn between the discomfort of intrusion and the warmth of familial support in their laughter, which echoed off the walls like constant reminders of choices I didn't quite understand. Concealed within the whirlwind of my thoughts was the nagging feeling that the strides we had made had somehow become entangled with my sister's demands. As the chaos of her life spilled into our shared space, I found myself feeling suffocated by the very familial bond I had craved. When I finally mustered the courage to address it, my sister, caught off guard, was defensive. "You used to be so welcoming," she challenged, and I could sense the shadows of our past struggles creeping in. Inherently, this was a moment of vulnerability for both of us, and as the silence hung heavy before me, I realized it wasn't just about me needing space, it was also about her needing to assert her independence in this shared space. After what felt like an eternity of misunderstanding, we sat down, nursing cups of tea, the clamor of her friends fading into the background. I spoke my truth, gentle yet firm. "I love having you here, but I need a little room to breathe sometimes." I watched as her expression softened, the realization dawning on her like the morning sun breaking through the clouds. "I get it," she finally said, her voice laced with empathy. "I'm still figuring this out too." From there, we laid the groundwork for a new kind of understanding, one that delicately balanced my need for tranquility with her vibrant, chaotic energy. We established times for her gatherings, leaving pockets of silence for both introspection and connection. As months slipped by like the autumn leaves falling gently from the trees outside, our family dynamic eased into a rhythm that felt right. With the festive season approaching, my parents decided to host a holiday dinner, hoping to gather everyone, both a celebration of the many transformations we had weathered and a nod to the community we had formed. We'd always traded off holidays with each other, but this year felt different. It pulsed with undercurrents of genuine appreciation. As the table filled with food and laughter, I observed the way my sister's friends mingled effortlessly with our family, an intertwined tapestry of relationships. Each conversation brought forth stories, inherited laughter, the kind born from shared histories and new experiences alike. But amidst the joy, I saw the familiar glint of tension creeping into the room as my parents expressed worry over their lingering mortgage, a detail I had hoped to keep under wraps. My sister, well-intentioned yet impulsive, enthusiastically shared ideas for a crowdfunding initiative to help with expenses. The way my parents' glimmers with confused hesitation only added weight to the conversation. I felt the room pulse with apprehension as layers of unspoken concern layered themselves upon my heart. Stepping in, I breathed deeply, drawing from the wisdom that had built itself over months of navigating rough waters together. "Let's talk this through as a family," I suggested, knowing we could find common ground. We always had. The discussion that followed was cathartic and revealing, each family member presenting their views, fears woven seamlessly into a tapestry of resolution. Finally, we reached an understanding that eased all our hearts, an agreement to pool resources into a family fund that would alleviate some stress while allowing my parents to invest in their passions. It opened the door to a more significant discussion about finances, futures, and the shared desire to support one another. Sitting around that holiday table, the glows of fairy lights expertly littering the room flickered, mirroring the warmth in our hearts. I understood, in that moment, reassurance and growth can coexist, just as laughter and arguments can. Our journey had only begun to blossom, intricate and beautiful, revealing itself as we paid attention and cared for one another, an ever-evolving chapter filled with love. It was a moment of profound truth for me. Maybe, in allowing ourselves to be vulnerable and honest, in navigating the messy underbelly of family life, we had built something sturdier than any foundation of separate lives. We had stitched a quilt of resilience, forever learning, forever growing, bound not by blood, but by our commitment to each other. Confession: I am a man of highly low intelligence, and there's a very slim chance that will ever change. That might sound like a harsh self-assessment, but when I look back on my life, it feels oddly true. From early on, I always struggled in school. While others grasped concepts with relative ease, I often found myself lost in a sea of confusion. It was a source of contention at home, primarily with my father, who'd often shake his head in frustration, muttering that I was a genuine disappointment. I grew up in the shadow of my brilliant sister, who always had top grades, a perfect college resume, and a charisma that seemed to attract everyone she met. When I graduated high school with a barely passing GPA, I decided to take a different path, one where I wouldn't have to compete against her brilliance. I started working at a local hardware store, surrounded by tools and paint cans, where I felt more at home than I ever did with textbooks. My coworkers accepted me for who I was, and I quickly learned the ins and outs of everything from different types of screws to the best ways to mix paint, the kind of knowledge that didn't really require sharp intellectual aptitude, just a willingness to listen and a decent memory. One fateful evening, as I was restocking shelves alone, I met her, Maria. She was an artist, doing some kind of community project that involved painting fences around town, and she wandered into our store for paint. She had a radiant energy, and as I helped her choose the right colors, her laughter warmed my insides in a way I'd never felt before. We struck up a conversation, and in that moment, surrounded by paint and hardware, I felt a spark of connection that made me forget all about my academic shortcomings. She didn't care that I was terrible at math or that I couldn't remember the capital of Kazakhstan. We talked about art, creativity, and our mutual love for nature. After that, she kept coming back to the store, and we'd share smiles that turned into inside jokes, and eventually, into something deeper. But there was a lingering fear in my heart. As things developed, I began to doubt myself and my worthiness. Maria had been to art schools and galleries, her mind was a treasure chest of culture and ideas, while I was just a guy who knew his way around a lawnmower. One night, I found myself at her place, where we were painting together under soft lighting, and she asked me about my dreams and aspirations. I froze, the question gnashing at a vulnerability I had buried deep. Could I express my dreams when they felt so mundane? I stammered out something about hoping to one day open my own hardware store, a quaint dream, perhaps, but it felt embarrassing next to her ambitions of having a gallery show. She sensed my hesitation and, rather than scoffing or diminishing my dream as I had feared, she smiled and said, "That's an incredible dream. You know you can do it, right?" Her words, rather than uplift me, lodged a sense of dread in my gut. What if she was investing time in a lost cause? As our relationship deepened, so did my anxiety. Each time I left her, I replayed our conversations, fixating on moments where I felt inadequate. I let my imaginations run wild, picturing her telling her friends about her simple boyfriend, a man who barely scraped by. One night, during a particularly vulnerable moment, I confessed my fears to her. I told her that I felt like we lived in two different worlds, one where she was a creative genius, and me, a man struggling to keep up. I braced myself for rejection, the feared look of pity or disappointment that had marked so many of my formative years. Instead, she took my hands and said, "You are more than enough for me. It's not about where we come from or where we're going, it's about the journey we build together." And for the first time, my heart felt a semblance of peace. Months passed, and I threw myself into the things I loved, working at the store, painting with Maria, and learning to embrace my creativity alongside hers. One warm afternoon, she proposed a project for the local art fair, encouraging me to join her in creating something that exhibited both of our talents. The thought terrified me, what if my lack of intelligence shone through in our joint piece? But somehow, I found a glimmer of hope in her vision. Together, we crafted a piece that merged practical elements with artistic flair, making a whimsical garden sculpture from discarded tools. The day of the fair arrived, and standing beside her, I felt an overwhelming sense of pride, not just in our creation but in who I was becoming. People stopped by, impressed with our work, and I realized that maybe, just maybe, intelligence could manifest in forms other than academia. I wasn't just restocking shelves and answering questions, I was creating something meaningful in a world that often dismissed me. As the sun began to set, the fair bustling around us, I took a breath, letting in the fading light that symbolized hope. Maria turned to me, her eyes sparkling, and said, "I knew you had it in you." Today, as I recount this journey, I find myself reflecting not on my seemingly low intelligence, but on my ability to learn and grow in different ways. I might never be a scholar or the wizard of numbers, but I've found a treasure in self-acceptance, an understanding that everyone's mind works differently, and that worth isn't solely defined by traditional intellect. I hope that my experience might resonate with someone else feeling inadequate or overlooked, and that they too might discover their own unique path to fulfillment. And while Maria and I continue our journey, I still think back to the nights spent under a roof of stars, learning to paint both canvases and dreams, trusting that love and creativity truly know no bounds. Update: a few weeks after the fair, we received an unexpected call. The local art gallery wanted to display our sculpture in their local artist showcase. They called it a captivating depiction of ingenuity and asked if we'd both be willing to speak about our collaboration at the event. It seems the journey never really ends, instead, it twists and turns, much like my own thoughts on who I am, a simple man, perhaps, but one who is continuously evolving. As I sat there, staring at the phone in disbelief after that unexpected call from the gallery, I couldn't shake the paradox of my life. How, in my own mind, which often felt muddled and simple, could we have created something that not only captured attention but also reflected our unfolding relationship? The days leading up to the event were a whirlwind, filled with a mixture of nervous anticipation and excitement that colored every moment. I helped Elena put the final touches on our sculpture, a woven collage of discarded materials that was both a physical manifestation of our efforts and a metaphor for our lives, imperfect, but undeniably beautiful. We spent long evenings in her studio, talking about everything and nothing, the quiet hum of the city outside our window punctuating our laughter. As the night of the gallery opening arrived, I nearly choked on my words upon addressing the audience. Standing there in a room filled with bright, brilliantly trained minds and eager art enthusiasts, I felt like an imposter draped in a second-hand suit, my own intelligence seeming to wane with each chuckle or knowing nod from the crowd. But as I spoke about our sculpture and how art had threaded its way into our romance, something shifted within me. I found my voice, steady and clear, illuminating our journey and the symbiotic nature of love and creativity. It was not an act of eloquence but of genuine feeling that transformed my simple words into something meaningful. While some murmured about our unique perspective and unorthodox methodologies, I recognized that what emerged from my mouth was more than just a presentation. It was a reflection of my journey as a man who often felt at odds with a world that valued intellect over passion. Each shared glance with Elena filled me with comfort, a silent reminder that love was smudged with imperfections, and sometimes, especially for someone like me, that was more than enough. There was a camaraderie among us, forged in late-night brainstorming sessions and quiet moments of shared solitude, and as patrons congratulated us after our presentation and poured admiration towards our work, I realized that perhaps being a man of highly low intelligence wasn't solely a deficiency. It was an invitation to explore life through a different lens, one that seemed to appreciate the beauty in the flawed and the fragmented. I even glimpsed admiration in the eyes of the gallery owner as she approached us, speaking with a warmth that enveloped me, acknowledging how our art encapsulated a kind of truth that resonated with many. As I stood there, basking in the glow of unexpected success, I felt the weight of my insecurities begin to lift like fog before a sunrise. While I knew I might not ever be a philosopher or a scientist, I understood that my strength lay not in knowing the intricacies of life but in feeling them deeply. Weeks turned into months, and the gallery opening became a backdrop, a moment in time when the stars aligned just right, illuminating the possibilities that lay ahead. Through it all, Elena and I grew, coupled in this tender evolution, and I found myself modifying my own internal narrative about intelligence. It was symbolic, a feeling of progression rather than a measurable standard. The world outside continued spinning, with its judgments and expectations, but within the cocoon of our connection, we painted new stories on hidden canvases in the quiet of our studio, learning that our experiences together shaped not just our art but our hearts. We even joked about starting an art collective for those of us who felt like outsiders, art for the amateurs, we called it, where creativity mattered more than critique, and anyone with a story to tell could join us, because in the end, who I was and who I became were merely threads in a beautifully chaotic tapestry unraveling before me. As I settled into bed that night, my heart full, I wondered where our newfound journey would take us next, the anticipation warming me like a gentle spring breeze carrying whispers of future possibilities. In the silence that enveloped the room, I made a wish, not for recognition or accolades, but for the strength to embrace my own uniqueness and to keep weaving dreams into reality, just as we had begun to do together. Days turned into weeks, and each morning dawned with a palpable excitement that sparkled in the air like sunlight dancing on the surface of water. As the date of the art gallery showcase approached, Amelia and I poured our hearts into preparing for the event, infusing our conversations with laughter and anticipation. I found myself spending hours in our little studio, the faint scent of paint and clay swirling around me, as our collaboration transformed not just our artwork but also our understanding of each other. We adapted our sculptural piece, adding small details inspired by late-night talks beneath the stars, tiny figures entwined in moments of joy and heartbreak, capturing fragments of stories we shared over warm cups of tea. As I molded the clay, I thought about how far I had come from the days when my thoughts felt heavy and clumsy. This project, this relationship, had made me realize that intelligence wasn't measured solely by the complexities of one's thoughts but also by the capacity for love, resilience, and the willingness to grow. When the night of the exhibit finally arrived, I donned my best shirt, a simple blue that made my eyes sparkle, while Amelia was a vision in a flowy dress that swirled around her like waves. As we entered the gallery, its walls alive with paintings and sculptures, I felt like a child walking into a world of endless possibilities. People mingled, their whispers and laughter creating a symphony that filled the expansive space. Our sculpture stood proudly at the center of the room, a blend of textures and colors showcasing our journey, a physical manifestation of uncertainty and companionship woven into every inch. I took a deep breath, the excitement mingling with a hint of nervousness, as I spotted the event curator making her way toward us. She smiled warmly, her eyes glinting with enthusiasm, and introduced herself as Camille. "The energy you both have together is inspiring," she said. "Your work embodies something deeply human." In that moment, my heart fluttered. Here was acknowledgement, not just of our art, but of the bond we nurtured along the way. As the night wore on, we spoke to visitors, sharing the story behind our sculpture, delving into the emotions, the fears, and the hopes we infused into our creation. I spoke honestly about my journey, about how I had once felt trapped in my own limitations, and how art had become my way of inviting others into my world. To my surprise, many of them didn't just see our sculpture, they resonated with my words, sharing their own struggles and triumphs in return. It felt like building a bridge between hearts, a candid exchange of dreams, fostering connections that evening. As the event began to wind down, the gallery owner announced the highlight of the night, the winner of the Local Artist Showcase Award. My stomach fluttered nervously, I hadn't even considered winning. When our names were called as the recipients, I was momentarily rooted to the spot, disbelief washing over me like a gentle tide. Amelia clasped my hand tightly, her joy infectious, and the applause that erupted around us felt like a warm embrace. When we stepped up to accept our plaque, a beautifully crafted piece of wood engraved with our names, I felt an unfamiliar warmth bloom in my chest. I took a deep breath, gathering my thoughts, and I spoke from my heart. This isn't just our accomplishment, it reflects the journey we dared to share. I am grateful for my partner in crime, whose love and creativity inspired every moment of this. The audience nodded, many smiling knowingly, as if they could see the truth in my words. Later that night, as we left the gallery hand in hand, the cool breeze danced around us, and the faint sounds of laughter echoed behind. Amelia turned to me, her cheeks flushed with happiness, and said, "We did this together." I admired her, feeling a rush of gratitude for her unwavering support and our shared dreams. It was a reminder of the simple truth that had guided me through this journey, that sometimes, the greatest triumphs come not from grand notions of intelligence, but from the beauty of vulnerability and connection. As we climbed into bed later that night, I whispered a silent vow to cherish this growth, to face each new day not with the weight of expectations, but with the unwavering courage to reveal my true self, the simple man striving to weave dreams into reality. The next chapter awaited, and I knew that no matter where it led, I would embrace it with an open heart, ready for whatever surprise awaited in the tapestry of life.